Welcome to the Lucky Jewathon. The Lucky Jewathon is a durational, interactive, virtual performance experience that responds to the Polish phenomenon of buying and selling caricatures of stereotypical images of Jews with coins for luck. Primarily economic luck. Huh? No, it's not a joke. The Lucky Jewathon is inspired by live televised telethon events like my personal favorite, the Jerry Lewis telethon. Jerry Lewis, the great comedian, would raise millions of dollars for children with muscular dystrophy. The Lucky Jewathon, instead of raising money, is going to raise awareness about lucky Jews, about Poland, and how the heck we got into this mess in the first place. These are lucky Jews. Well, that's what we have called them, but in Poland they're called Jew with a coin, or Żydki, which means little Jew. But that's not a nice word, so don't use it. These common objects of Polish folklore popped up when Poles, tired of communism, were looking for a little bit of luck to get out of communism and into capitalism. And who's luckier in Poland than the Jew? And who's better at making money than the Jew? How dare you! So now these images are everywhere. Well, not everywhere, but they're pretty common, and they're getting even more popular. At this point, they're even more popular than Pope John Paul II. What? Just kidding. No one's more popular than PJ2. Not even Jesus. He was a Jew. For many, these images are cherished reminders of the days of yonder. For others, they're simply stereotypical racist images, and during the Lucky Jewathon, we're going to talk about them. We've invited 18 hosts from around the world to spend 72 hours responding to the lucky Jews with panels, conversations, art projects, art experiments, film festivals, DJ sets, and more. We're trying to figure out how to make sense of these objects. We want you to participate in this interactive event. As soon as you join the Zoom room, you're a participant in the performance. You might be asked to join into whatever is going on at the time, and if you're not asked, we encourage you to join. What if I don't want to join? That's okay. You can simply sit back in your undies and observe on the Facebook or the YouTube where we're going to be live streaming. In 72 hours, we will go to Poland, Canada, Australia, America, Germany, London, and more. You can come and go at any time over the course of the 72 hours. So while you're having obiad with Kuba Nowakowski in Poland, you could be drunk in the middle of the night in Australia. While you're having breakfast with Erica Lair in Montreal, you can be drunk in the middle of the day in Poland. Whatever your drink of choice, coffee, vodka, Alka-Seltzer, we encourage you to crack it open, turn on your computer, and try your luck at the Lucky Jewathon. We'll see you there.
Lucky Jewathon.
3 days.
72 hours.
Lucky Jewathon.
I'll be streaming
from Philadelphia,
North London,
Warsaw,
Montreal, Berlin, Warsaw,
Connecticut,
Melbourne, Australia.
Why did I agree to participate in Lucky Jewathon?
Because it really made me laugh. I think there's a real chutzpah in the question about whether we're lucky or not.
I find the Lucky Jew just a fascinating historical and cultural phenomenon.
We're creating a kind of different playing ground for difficult but fun conversation about cultural representation and caricatures.
To present the complexity of Jewish culture, especially here in Poland.
I love this project. I find it ridiculously important, fun, funny, tragic.
Bewildering and bemusing and strange and offensive all at the same time.
I'm interested in the deconstruction of of archetype, stereotype, and fetish.
I have been pretty intrigued by these wooden figurines of Jews since my very first visit to Poland in the spring of 1990, when I encountered one in a market stall.
There's a lot of interesting issues around it to discuss, to deal with this topic in a way that's both irreverent and serious.
I think it's a crazy difficult topic
and a great opportunity to
make people hear and aware of this really odd
existence and problematic nature of these figurines in Poland.
In a very interesting way, this project opened the space for
some interesting conversations with interesting people.
And if there's a possibility of approaching it with a sense of humor, that's great.
Such a crazy idea that I just couldn't say no.
In the Lucky Jewathon, I will be performing as a lucky Jew.
I'll be screening 6 short films of mine, experimental films.
I'll take you for a tour of Kazimierz, somewhere after the war, but before the changes of 1990s and early 2000s.
It has not always felt like being a Jew in the UK is particularly lucky. Recently, it's definitely complex. And that's something that I'll be talking about in my 4 hours with you.
We'll perform mainly with music, but also with poetry and with cooking.
As I was asked, I immediately had an idea. I started writing a song.
I hope to talk about stereotypes and to ask questions about stereotypes.
I'm hoping to talk about using humour and satire to engage with and as a response to anti-Semitism.
With me, I'll have some of our merchandise, magnets, coasters, mugs, fridge magnet jigsaw puzzle, canvases.
I'll also be reviewing gherkins.
I hope to continue this work of broadening the conversation and having us all think together on what these things might mean and what they say about us and how they might be problematic.
I look forward to 72 hours of gabbing.
With artists from different countries all over the world.
I'm very much looking forward to it.
How do I feel about participating by way of a look on my face?
Since you wanted me to show it on my face, yes. Looking forward.
Lucky Jewathon.
3 days.
72 hours.
Lucky Jewathon.
I almost said 72 days.
Everybody! Welcome to the Lucky Jewathon! And I could not be more excited. I can't tell you how excited I am. I'm also nervous. I'm sweating. I'm happy you're not here because boy, do I stink. Okay, don't worry. I'm not going to be performing like I'm in the Catskills the entire time, but I might every now and again because when I put on the costume, I just transform. I just love it. So anyways, I'm very, very happy that you're all here. My name is Michael Rubenfeld. I am one of 3,240,000 hosts we have. Just kidding, we have 18 hosts from around the world and I'm number 1. But I'm not the best, but I'm the first. So a couple of things to start off. During this segment, this 4-hour segment, we have live translation from Polish, no, sorry, I'm not speaking Polish, I'm speaking English, from English into Polish. So if you would like translations, we got 2 interpreters. We've got Magda Rubenfeld-Korolewska and Piotr Krasnowolski. They are here with us for 4 hours. And in order to do that, you look at the very bottom on the right-hand side. There's a little world sign that says interpretation underneath. You can click on that sign and you can choose what language you want to be translated into. So if you choose English, you will only hear me because I'm speaking English. If you choose Polish, you will hear either Magda or Piotr over the course of the next 4 hours. There are a few other segments that are going to be translated, mostly from Polish to English, because we are live. We are a global event. We're around the world, and I can already see that there are people here from around the world. So, a couple more things. If you're in the room, you're in the room. That means You are already a part of the performance. Mazel tov, congratulations. How does it feel? So what I would like to ask is that if you're in the room, turn on your camera so that I can see you. I don't even have myself spotlit. I know that I might be spotlit for someone. I've got me on gallery view, but I can see people. I can see your cameras. I can see that you're on. The idea is to sort of feel like we're in a big community. I'm going to talk. There's my dad. My dad is here. Adam Shorin is here. He's one of the other stars of the Lucky Jewathon. Thank you. Oh, it's so great that you're all turning your cameras on. Thank you. Please keep doing it. Keep doing it. I'm going to spiel for a little bit, and then we're actually going to have we're going to have guests and conversation, a lot of conversation over the course of my 4 hours. For those who aren't familiar with how this is going to work, we're going for 72 hours nonstop. And over the course of about 72 hours, you're welcome to come and go as you please. If you're in the Zoom room, the link that you've got will be the same link. And we've been doing it through a project that we call the Lucky Jew. This is a name we stole from Erica Lehrer, who is going to be the last host. It's a name that we stole from her, and we've used it. And now people start calling these things Lucky Jews, even though they're not necessarily. That's not what they're actually called. They're actually called Zhidki, which means little Jews, but it's a kind of derogatory term, or Jew with a coin. And we have a project where, well, basically, it's a project that we started, and I'm going to, we have a really exciting time coming up because Paulina Fiedash, who is a film director, has made a film about the Jew with coins, and we're going to show it in about 15 minutes. But before, and then afterwards, she's going to stay and join us. It's about a 25-minute film. We're going to talk to her about the film. We're also going to talk to Erica Lehrer, who's the star of the film. Other people who are going to be joining me over the course of my 4 hours is Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimlet, who a lot of you will already be familiar with. She is the head curator of the Polin Museum. I know that's not her official title, Adam, but I don't have it written down in front of me. Adam is very disappointed with me already. Towards the end of the evening, Herbie Barnes, who is an artist, an Indigenous artist from Canada, who's a colleague of mine, is going to be joining me. And we're actually going to talk about the way that Indigenous people's imagery, Indigenous people have been caricatured in North American context, not just North American context, but we're going to have a conversation about that. We're going to take it away from Jews in total and move it into Indigenous culture, First Nations culture. Now what I want to do is I want to do a quick shout out to our partners and sponsors. And then I'm going to show you, some of you I'm sure are familiar with this, but I'm going to then show you a video that we made about the original Lucky Jew project, which was the kind of inspiration for the Lucky Jewathon. And then we're going to move into welcoming, Paulina. But actually, you know, just if we can just actually like take a moment, can you all just like turn on your microphones and say hello, your names, where you're from? I know I said this is going to be participatory, and it'll probably get more participatory after we watch Paulina's film. But for the time being, I just love to say hi to all of you, and if you can say hi to everyone else and where you're from.
Hi, I'm from Brussels, Małgorzata. I've seen your thing on YouTube about Lucky Jew. It was a year ago or 2 years ago, and it was absolutely fascinating. And I am scared to death, in abject fear of this Lucky Jew thing. And you managed to make it less scary, if not funny. Thank you very much indeed.
Thanks, Małgorzata, and thank you for all of your amazing conversation on Facebook so far. We've really appreciated it.
Hi, everyone. I'm Judith Cohen. I know Michael from Toronto, and I actually did not see him and Magda in Krakow when I was there a couple of years ago. Did some concerts for the JCC in Krakow and the Cervantes Institute and the Zephyr Conference. And I'm an ethnomusicologist and folk singer specialized in Sephardic music, and looking forward to seeing as much of this as I can manage to. I'll be in and out.
Bushra, Johnny, you're on. Why don't you say hi?
Hi, I am an Iraqi academic. I'm writing about Iraqi Jews, so that I'm interested in this program to know more about the Jews. Yeah.
Super. Let's do a couple more intros, and then we'll move on, because I just realized there's a lot of people in this room, so we'll continue to do intros kind of over. Mayor, are you talking?
Yes.
Yeah,
why not?
Nice to see you. Who are you?
I'm Mayor. I'm from Israel, and I think not Chabad. Sorry, I'm from Israel. I think the Lucky Jew is one of the most embarrassing thing in Poland. It's pathetic stereotype, and I think it should be outside the law. I believe so. But I have a present you. Surprise.
Wow. Is that Jesus?
Lucky Jesus.
A lucky
He's a Jew,
Jesus.
right?
He's the Jew. Mayor. Wow, we should have a conversation. I got a business proposal for you.
Okay, look. I have to tell you something. It cost me more than 10 times to buy one Jew in Krakow. But
listen, yeah.
But I think it's time to break it. I think it's time to take it off. I think it's shame. But I'm here to enjoy your show.
That's great. One thing for you to note, Mayor, and for everyone to note, that actually, I don't have the schedule directly in front of me, but at some point we're actually going to have a conversation with the city of Krakow, with very important people from the city of Krakow, who we at Festivals have been starting a partnership with, to actually have a conversation about what to do in the future about these objects. So this is not only, this event is not only about having fun and awareness just for the sake of it. It's actually because we're putting things in motion to actually be practical. This is a conversation we're going to be having over and over and over again over the course of the next 72 hours.
I'm very happy for that. And if you will be very good, I have another one.
A lucky nun, but she's not a Jew, so she's not lucky.
She's not, no, she's maybe the mother.
Okay, guys, so, oh, yes, Carrie, my father.
I think you should make a mention of Mr. Bulka and allow him to talk about his foundation and the important work that he's doing in Poland with respect to cemetery reclamation.
Only your father would have the guts 20 minutes into your project to start telling you how to do your project. Only a father. Thank you. Thanks, Dad. Meir, we want to hear all about it. Now is not the time, but we have 72 hours. And Meir, we're going to find some time for you over the course of the 72 hours, but not yet. Okay.
Except Shabbat.
And not on Shabbat either. Not on Shabbat. Of course, not on Shabbat. Okay. I'm going to show, you know what? I think I'm going to hold off because I see Paulina is here. I'd like to introduce Paulina, and then we're going to watch her film. We can move into watching a bit more about the original Lucky Jew project in the a bit later on. Yeah, Magda, is there anything that I'm missing that I absolutely have to say? I didn't thank all the partners and all of the people. No, but she says no. It's okay. Great. Paulina, hi, welcome.
Hello, hello. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Hello
Great.
to everybody.
It's super to see you. So Paulina, we're going to show your film in a second, but I wondered if you might tell us a little bit about your film and how the heck you even got into this mess.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I think it's a long story, but actually we filmed this movie 6 years ago. We created it together with Erika Lehrer, and the movie is rather self-explanatory. However, what I would like to mention before you will watch the movie is that for me, it's one of my most interesting, I would say, and important projects. Also one of the most controversial, I would say. What is so amazing about this project for me, it's that it was amazing journey for me. Like this project totally changed my mindset, okay? So we filmmakers, we usually like to ask questions. We don't like to give direct answers. We like to dip into subjects. We like to challenge people. And obviously, I'm Polish. I live in Krakow. So at some point of my life, I realized that, there's so many Jewish figurines around me. And to be perfectly honest with you, most of the time I saw the figurines with the coins, and that made me very frustrated and very angry. So I had the idea in my mind for a while before I met Erika Lehrer to make something about the movie, to show it to Polish people, to show it that, it's wrong to have such figurines in my country. So then Erika came to me with this idea that she's preparing the exhibition in Krakow about the very same topic. And it was like, how we say it, match made in heaven. I was so happy and excited for that. And I say, wow, it's time, like you are the one, we are doing it. So to start with, Meir Bułka, I was like, I had the same emotions as you have now, to be honest with you. But what is fascinating, and I'm really interested to learn and to see what will be your feedback after watching the movie. And now I'm talking to all the beautiful people who gathered today to watch it. How will you receive it? Because you know what, the movie taught me something. It was a very important lesson for me. Like I realized and understood that really nothing in life is black and white, and that we all carry prejudices and we all carry stereotypes. But what is really precious and important is if we try to confront our own beliefs, and if we try to understand them, sometimes we may discover some really amazing, surprising to us things. So I guess that's all that I would like to share before we watch the movie. And yeah, like without any further ado, I think we can start it.
Okay, and just a quick note, a quick hi to Erica. Before we start, Erica's here. Do you want to say a quick hi, Erica? Just before we start the movie, we're going to come back to you afterwards. Or are you too busy cooking? Cooking.
Can you hear me? No, I'm trying to figure out. I have too many Zoom links here. 1 second. Too many ways. I'm going to try to put my camera on.
Too many
Erica,
screens in your hands.
There you are. Hey, this is Erica. Erica's the star of the film that you're about to see.
Yes, I'm just much older now. Yes, I didn't fully hear what Paulina was saying, but I'm sure it was correct. Yeah, I mean, I met Paulina because she was working at this Jewathon Jewish bookshop, which was a place that I had a long time relationship with, and who was sort of my Polish family, and they were supporting me when I was putting together this exhibition, which was kind of, it was a big struggle in many ways. It was a struggle to, find all these objects from all over the country, to get the museum to be sort of on board with the idea or understand the idea, to bring objects sort of from out on the street into a 19th century ethnographic museum. And anyway, there were many, many struggles. And yeah, at a certain point, I realized that we wanted to have some kind of ethnographic evidence, of people engaging with these figurines, especially the ones with coins that were being sold. Well, they're kind of intersecting histories of different kinds of Jewish figurines, but there's this one Easter fair that's been happening since medieval times in Krakow called Emmaus. And we knew that they had long sold these Jewish figurines there, for over probably 150 years. We have evidence. And so I knew that Paulina was this wonderful filmmaker. She was working at the bookshop. And so I asked if she would essentially do some research for me. I couldn't be there in Poland at that particular time. So I think that's, in my memory, that's how it started, where she did these incredible interviews with people buying and selling figurines at the Emmaus Fair in Krakow. I think it was that must have been it was either 2012 or 2013.
Well,
I guess
2013, I think. Mm-hmm.
And then she also did a whole number of other interviews we made a list together of sort of interesting people who could speak about the phenomenon of Jewish figurines kind of in general, not only with the coins. And that's something that's, important. I guess you'll see in the film, I haven't watched it in quite a while, but distinguishing like the so-called lucky Jews, which, in my interpretation are quite a recent phenomenon that hooks into a very long history of association with Jews and magic, and sort of wealth, but it much more broadly construed. And then this more recent phenomenon of like that being narrowed down in this kind of newly capitalist moment in Poland to like cold hard cash. So figurines suddenly get coins. So yeah, I don't know. What else do you want me to say, Michael?
No, that was like, wow. I didn't realize we were going to get so much before the film. Because of course, but you always bring such incredible context to whatever you do. And I'm looking forward to talking to the two of you more, for all of us to talk to you after the film. The film is about 25 minutes. Is that correct?
I don't even remember.
24 minutes. The film is subtitled in Polish if you're a Polish speaker as well. We know we've got this live streaming on YouTube and Facebook, so we don't know exactly everyone who's watching. So this is important. If you don't speak English, you can enjoy it. I think it's Polish anyway. Anyways, okay. So without further ado, let's watch the film, and we'll see you in about 24 minutes.
Co roku podczas lanego poniedziałku przychodzimy tu na Salwator i polujemy na Żyda.
Kto nie ma w domu z Emausu Żyda, tego spotka ciężka bida.
Podobno mają przynosić szczęście właśnie, ten grosik tak zwany.
Ta kultura jest mi obca, ale kupiłem, bo ładnie wygląda. że z Emaus bez Żyda się nie wychodzi. Najbardziej emausowski Żyd musi się kiwać. Kupujemy czwartego Żyda, nie mamy biedy i po prostu kultywujemy tą tradycję, działa.
He's ugly. It's a caricature. It's not a lovely Jew. It's the ugly Jew. It's the anti-Semitic version of the Jew.
I saw a weird, funny-looking, ugly Jew, sometimes counting money or doing other stereotypic stuff. And I said, oh, yeah, well, what do you expect? This is also the stories that I used to hear from my grandparents.
I do not see myself represented in these figures. It's not me. I'm a Jew. I'm involved in Jewish practice and religious practice in a different way from the figures represented here.
Wyglądaj, czy idzie Eryka. Wyglądaj. Wyglądaj,
O,
czy
idzie,
jest. O,
idzie.
jak to miło, że jesteś z powrotem. Cześć.
Hej.
Jak się masz? Cześć.
No widzisz jak to urosło?
No.
Jak podróż?
Trochę jestem niewyspana, ale
zawsze.
no, jak zawsze.
Coś mam dla ciebie. Od razu ci mówię, bo to ważne. Tak. Nie prezent, może prezent. Słuchaj, mam tutaj figurkę na tą twoją wystawę. Znalazłam upolowane. Popatrz, to jest ten rzeźbiarz, który robił kiedyś te normalne rzeźby, ale teraz popatrz, co dokłada. Pieniążkę.
Wow. My name is Erica Lehrer, and I'm an anthropologist, a cultural anthropologist, and I'm interested in issues of heritage and memory and how history is communicated to the public and how people live in the context of history. I came to Poland for the first time in 1990, and I was here with my brother, actually. We traveled together, and when we were here, you know, we sort of realized also we have a personal connection because our grandparents were from Poland, Jews from Poland. And so that also was, you know, in the back of our minds. And we didn't really know much else about Poland, except, of course, that, you know, Auschwitz was here. And so we wanted to see the camp, to have some experience of that history, which was so mythological for us and formative. Pierwszy raz, jak widziałam w ogóle figurkę, było w Zakopanem. I tam był jakiś targ, gdzie jest ten, nie wiem, dolina, tak.
Na Kropówkach.
I było, nie wiem, te takie stoły, gdzie ludzie, kramy. I mieliście tam stare rzeczy, jakby antykwaryczne rzeczy i różne rzeczy. No, łączne z tym było jakby pamiątki z czasy hitlerowskie.
Aha.
Pamiętam, że były te na przykład te takie guziki z SS-em.
Ze swastyką też?
Tak, różne rzeczy z swastyką. Tam w tym jednym kramie też był taki, to był unikalny, jakąś figurkę Żyda. W tej kontekście tak był tak. I w ogóle z tym wszystkim, co było w moim głowie w ogóle, że nie wiem, jakoś, że no to tu było miejsce, gdzie stało się po prostu Holokaust i w ogóle i nigdy nie widziałam coś takiego w życiu i oczywiście myślałam, że to jest antysemicki.
Jak poznałeś, że to jest od razu Żyd?
No bo był ten jakby klasyczny stereotyp Żyda, to był mając takie czarne ubranie, broda, czapkę, te pejsy i trzymał książkę. In listening to people talk, I started to realize that these figurines kind of really embody that misfit of memories and of different cultures of memory in a really powerful way. And so I thought that they could be a really useful tool to try to get people to discuss or to express the different perspectives that they hold and why the figurines mean one thing or another thing to them. And so we could learn a lot about each other. Each side could learn about the other through looking at the figurines and having an opportunity to express themselves in that context.
I mean, in part, this is why the figurines are so powerful. I mean, they themselves don't mean any one thing, but they're a really amazing tool for understanding and eliciting how people feel about Jewishness.
Po pierwsze, takiej figurki nie można sobie kupić, tylko trzeba ją dać komuś w prezencie, tylko wtedy to działa, wtedy właśnie przynosi bogactwo. Tutaj właśnie mamy Żyda, który jest bardziej ozdobnym niż przynoszącym szczęście, gdyż są dwa rodzaje, które powinien każdy Polak prawdziwy w domu posiadać. Jest to Żyd z pieniążkiem oraz Żyd z cytryną. Cytryna, aby w domu zawsze jedzenie było i żeby stoły puste nie były, a z pieniążkiem właśnie po to, żeby bogactwo w domu zawsze istniało, a Żyda powinno się postawić na ścianie, która jest nie naprzeciwko drzwi, bądź w specjalnym kąciku, który jeszcze na wsi się to czasem kultywuje, są tak zwane święte kąciki. Najchętniej od razu obok obrazu z Żydem liczącym pieniądze. Taki obraz w okresie szabasu należy odwrócić drugą stroną, a najlepiej do góry nogami, żeby te wszystkie pieniądze, które Żyd zbierał przez cały tydzień, nie wpadły do jego sakiewki, tylko właśnie zostały w domu gospodarza.
I think people who object, Jewish people who object to these figurines in Poland have morphed the issue into their general attitudes towards Poland generally, and find the whole issue of stereotype uncomfortable because they don't really like Poland in general before they even start.
To me, the whole idea of them is that I'm bothered by them, not because I think they're anti-Semitic, because I think that generally in the world there's a perception of Poland as an anti-Semitic place, and Jews especially who come to visit here aren't coming with a neutral point of view, they're coming with sort of a negative, assuming the negative already, and that Poland, and having this bad opinion, and then when they see the coins, it's kind of an aha, Jews with coins, Poland is exactly what I thought, anti-Semitic, we're all money-hungry, thieves or something like that, and it plays into the stereotypes of how Jews think that Poles see them. So that to me is the thing. I think they make Poland look bad more than they upset me as someone Jewish living here.
Te figurki zastąpiły coś, co było znacznie gorsze. Na przykład w XIX wieku na szczęście czasami wieszano w izbach chłopskich kość cmentarza żydowskiego, więc tutaj ta ewolucja jednak jest bardzo, bardzo widoczna.
Kiedy pierwszy raz tutaj byłaś?
Ja?
Tak.
No, to jest dla mnie pierwszy raz.
Jesteś pierwszy raz na Meusia?
Tak.
Wcześniej nie byłaś? Ja myślałam, że byłaś, jak byłaś tutaj robić jakieś badania wcześniej.
Nie, bo rok temu wysłałam ludzi, żeby robić wywiady dla mnie, bo nie mogłam być tutaj, bo uczę.
A mnie się wydawało, że jakiś był taki moment, kiedy przyjechałaś tutaj wcześniej i byłaś na Emausie. Nie byłaś. O, no to fajnie, to jest przygoda w takim razie.
Który myślisz byłby dobry na wystawie? Bo chciałabym, że zachęcam ludzi, żeby spróbować.
Ale to niektóre z nich się inaczej kiwają, bo one mają chyba, niektóre mają łatwiej, niektóre gorzej.
Tak, ale może chyba musisz...
O, ten jest fajny, ma ptaszka,
no, to ślicznie.
Ma Katarynkę i ślicznie się kiwa.
Ale to jakoś nie ma sensu, bo nie modlę się.
O, ten jest dobry. Ten jest dobry.
48.
Many non-Jewish Polish people, they don't notice these figurines at all, or they think of them as something that's nostalgic or a positive stereotype, something they might like to have in their home, something that they think might bring good luck.
I just wanted to admit that it can become a little bit of an obsession, and if you're looking for long enough, suddenly everything starts to look like a Jew. I was looking at this.
I saw a few back there that just is sort of hidden in the corner, a little painting or something. So it might be interesting to ask. And especially with these that look more like the folk art rather than just the complete tourist ones. But it might be nice for us to look and observe this one a little bit.
I have a
master's student, Dara Bramson, who's helping me coordinate a group of students who are looking around Krakow to try to find Jewish figurines and try to understand why they're there, try to discuss with the sellers and maybe with people who buy them, and try to understand the context that they're in, what kind of objects they are.
What does it say? The picture that is depicting the Jew counting money is to be hung by the door, by the entrance door in house or of the company. And here is instruction. And you are going to have luck in business.
Does she have one in her own house?
Yes. But that one, and it is very successful.
It was very successful. Oh, okay. They bring out certain aspects of latent anti-Semitism and stereotypes and myths about Jews. I overheard some troubling things. Someone saying, okay, I'm going to buy this Jew for luck, but if it doesn't bring me luck, I'm going to throw him in the fire.
Proszę nie fotografować towaru, że tak powiem.
Dlaczego?
Dlatego, że się tak nie robi, proszę pani.
Bo to jest miejsce publiczne, można.
Miejsce publiczne to jest to całe, a to jest moje.
The first thing that I noticed was the big nose of the Jew and the coin. And it made me a little bit angry because it's some kind, as I see it, of a prejudice that the Jews are all have a big nose or rich people. So I'm a Jew and I don't have not a big nose, I hope. And as far as I know, I'm not that rich. So, but basically I think that prejudices and stereotypes are a dangerous thing.
Myślę, że większość tych sprzedawców, nie będąc ekspertami od zagadnień Holokaustu, nie zdaje sobie sprawy z tego, że w podobnej estetyce, oczywiście jeszcze bardziej wyostrzonej, czy podobną estetyką jeszcze bardziej wyostrzoną, posługiwali się naziści 70 ileś lat temu, no i to w określonych celach. Po to, żeby obrazić, po to, żeby oddzielić, po to, żeby zbudować mur, po to, żeby upodlić.
Nie wiem, jakie są intencje osób, które tworzą te figurki. Nie wiem tak naprawdę, co dla nich te figurki mają oznaczać, więc ciężko mi po prostu osądzić. Dla mnie nigdy bym nie pomyślała negatywnie o Żydach, patrząc na tą figurkę.
Ale generalnie nie można powiedzieć, że figurka jest zła albo dobra, bo figurka to jest przedmiot, ona nie może być zła ani dobra. To nie jest voodoo. Dobre lub złe mogą być tylko i wyłącznie intencje, które sprawiają, że ktoś taką figurkę tworzy lub zamawia taką figurkę.
We're going to a town called Połaniec, which is a small town in what used to be the Russian part of Poland, to meet Józef Reguła, who is a woodcarver. And I know him because he makes wooden Jewish figurines, and he sells them through the Yarden Jewish bookshop in Krakow, in Kazimierz. So in a small town like this, in southeastern Poland, almost all of these shops and houses around the main square would have been Jewish shops and Jewish houses. So it's easy to understand where Reguła got his inspiration. Dzień dobry, panie Józefie. Jak się masz?
Jako tako po japońsku.
No co psiur. Spał.
Nie opuszcza mnie na krok, pod nogami stoi wszędzie. Wczoraj to się chciałem zabić na nim.
No ma rację.
Dalej jest ryzykowny z psem?
Na miejscu tego domu mieszkali Żydzi. Tu mieszkali Żydzi. Być może to jest jakieś metafizyczne, nie wiem. Ale ścisła rzeźba się zaczęła od tego, że zainspirował mnie pierwszy szwagier, znaczy brat cioteczny Doroty, bo któregoś dnia powiedział, że wyrzeźbiłbyś figurkę Żyda. Potem miałem szwagierkę, która była Żydówką. już nie żyje niestety, bardzo ciepła kobieta, pochodziła z Mielca. Jej się te pierwsze bardzo podobały, co jak wiadomo zachęca do tego i temat się rozwijał. Zacząłem czytać, zacząłem się interesować tym wszystkim. Potem Singer doszedł, który wniósł kolosalne, bo poznałem kulturę. Nie pozna się kultury w całości raz, dwa, trzy, ale jakąś tam część tą dla mnie, która mnie była bardzo plastyczna do rzeźby, bardzo wciągnęła. Znaczy, ja myślę, że to nie jest antysemickie, bo przecież w wielu kulturach przedstawia się przedstawicieli kultury. Antysemickie to by było wtedy, gdybym jakieś symbole rzeźbił na tym, a ja nie rzeźbię żadnych, zresztą nawet nie uznaję, żeby coś takiego robić, bo po co? To nie ma wtedy, gdybym pokazywał jakieś symbole antysemickie, no to wtedy by byłoby antysemickie, ale no, każdy ma prawo sądzić tak, jak sądzi, no trudno. No. Wiem, że w judaistyce w ogóle nie powinno się przedstawiać postaci ludzkich. No ale ja nie jestem wiary judaistycznej, hebrajskiej, więc myślę, że to nie dotyczy mnie. Tylko z jednej strony go pan weźmie, jako z drugiej. To jest kawał klocka. Zakurzony. No i powoli.
Nie, zaraz, ja go proszę.
Na ukos. Tam myślałem, że wejdzie. No, na ukos wejdzie.
But when my parents came to visit me about 14, 15 years ago when I was doing research here in Poland, they also bought a figurine, one of Regua's. It's a pair, a couple with their children, hugging their children. You know, I think for my parents, it's really a very nostalgic work, and it kind of captures for them some sense of tradition and maybe their own parents' world and the Jewish past. And so it's really interesting for me how Regua somehow in his own attempts to capture the Jewish past in a way that's meaningful for him, he really actually kind of captures the same kind of nostalgia that many foreign Jews have for the Polish Jewish past. So there's a kind of overlap of nostalgias.
Everything in the world can be used for good and can be used for bad. So everything has a good reason, and also we can use it for bad side. And what we need to do in this world is to know how to use everything for the good, and to know what to find the goods in everything and to use it for goods. The same is this figure. This figure is kind of art. It's something very nice, and people like it and people love it, and this is something very nice. And people like this, and I'm myself also like this, and that's why I'm selling this.
I would collect these, every single different one there is. In fact, I have collected them, and I've been collecting them for the last 30 years. And I find them actually quite interesting, in part because they're so disturbing.
You know, I wanted to both show something that's sort of ethnographically honest, but also interesting. So, you know, these are figurines from one carver who makes figurines of Jews, and he also makes animals. And I really liked this kind of pairing of the Jew with the penguin, because you can see there actually is a kind of similarity, right? I mean, they're both black with the white stripe in the middle. It's like a refrigerator magnet. You can see the magnet. It's a Jew with a counter holding a bag of money and counting some money. And of course, it's written Kraków, so it's a souvenir of your visit here. And then there's this one, which is, it's very clear. It's written on it, na fortuna, or, for fortune. And there's one Polish penny. And then actually the figurine is holding a bag, which interestingly has a dollar sign on it. And then, there's a whole bunch of sort of very small figurines. Not all of them have coins. And of course, it's the same genre of like small figurines of traditionally dressed sort of Krakow men and women, but are small, what look like religious Hasidic Jews with side locks and with coins. Sometimes they have some of the older characteristics also, like playing music, but now also with a coin, or carrying a briefcase to work, but now also holding a coin. And actually this guy, he has a little hole in his bottom because he actually sits on a pencil. So you can buy pencils with with Jews on them as well. This also is is another really strange object. So it's a kind of rubber ducky, which is a sort of a traditional funny object that children play with in the bath. But this one is dressed up like a Hasidic Jew with side locks with payas. And this actually was purchased in the Jewish Museum in Berlin. And of course, there the context is it's supposed to be some sort of provocative art piece. But you know, if you put this in Poland, obviously it has a very different valence. So it's interesting that, you know, certain things are allowed in Germany today that people make no comment about, but in Poland, they raise a lot of different kind of emotions. Witam wszystkich, welcome everyone. I'm going to use the Montreal style of like passive bilingualism. So if everything goes well, everyone will understand something. This is an exhibit I've been imagining for a long time. Pomysł na tą wystawę urodził się jakiś czas temu. In my travels in Poland in the last 20 years, Jewish figurines have been a constant companion. They really are a phenomenon here. While figurines of Jews can be found in other countries, including Israel, because of its particular Jewish history, in Poland, the figurines have a special power. When you become so used to having them around, I think it's possible to sort of stop thinking about them at all and stop noticing them at all. And I think there's a real loss there because it's really important to acknowledge the world of images that we sort of live and breathe every day, because those things do influence our understandings of other people and ourselves. I think it's really important to think about this stereotype in a really long history that stretches back to the Middle Ages, in which you know, Jews were forced into certain kinds of professions in the Christian world. And those professions were deemed very negative, things that good Christians shouldn't do. And then Jews were marked by those things. And of course, through the years, there have been many kinds of you know, prejudices and also violent attacks on Jews because of ideas that they have money, control the world. You know, it's important to think about these images of Jews on the backdrop of the particular Jewish history that, you know, there was in Poland, very long and complicated and flourishing, but of course, ultimately tragic. Coming to Kazimierz, knowing this incredibly rich Jewish life that was here before, you know, these streets full of Jewish people in every level of society, speaking their own language, having their own society, culture, traditions. And, you know, walking those streets today and seeing instead, you know, little wooden figurines of people who looked something like what some of those people looked like, that's pretty painful. Everywhere at all times, people use different kinds of objects and images to make sense of the past. So, you know, in a really broad perspective, that's what's happening here. I mean, Jewish figurines are filling a hole where a whole world of Jews used to be.
Thank you all. Thank you so much. Wow, what a great way to start this off. I want to just thank Paulina again. Before we bring Paulina and Erica back, I want you all to know that if you felt like the film, you know, and I feel like this is a really meaningful film and it's really important. I'm really grateful to Paulina that she shared it with us. And if, you know, in order to make these kinds of documents, and if we want to support Paulina and her continued ability to make these kinds of documents, I would like to encourage you to consider making a donation to Paulina. I have just posted her address here, her PayPal. Any little thing certainly could help. It's really amazing that this exists to start us all off. Thank you again, Paulina, and thank you, Erica, who I'm going to invite you both back if we can spotlight both Paulina and Erica. And bring them in, or maybe I can do it. Oh, there's Erica. And Paulina. Hi both. Thank you very much again. How does it feel watching the film now? Watching the film right now?
Youth.
I don't think you look that different. Personally.
Actually, look the same, exactly the same.
No, I mean, honestly, it was such a fun time too, and it was so great working with Paulina. I'm just like, I'm having a wash of nostalgia, you know. I don't know, Paulina. I mean, I want to hear from Paulina. Like, you know, it's her film. I mean, it's. I was just doing I was doing something over here, and she just made this incredible film about it.
It's like same. It's like same. You know, you make your movies and you don't watch them later, so sometimes you forget what you've done in the past. So sometimes it's nice to be back and to watch it again. But actually, I'm more interested in our lovely people who gather here. I would like to know their opinion.
Yeah, if anyone wants to respond, I know a couple people wrote their response, but please feel free to turn on your microphone and just jump in.
Or even ask questions.
You want
Maybe
me to
I'll
start?
Oh, sure, Meir, always.
I have something to say. When I saw, okay, I know about this stereotype and I know about the collection. Actually, Erica, you have a big competitor.
I knew there'd be some.
You have a big competitor.
4.
1 second.
Oh, wow.
So can I just ask
how
you?
Many more?
Meir,
this one you don't have.
But does that one have
Meir, you're living in Poland, correct?
No, I live in Israel.
You live in Israel, but you spend a lot of time in Poland.
Yes.
I'm just curious.
I'm coming a lot to Poland.
What has compelled you? I mean, you started off earlier saying, you know, you think they should be gone, you think they're an embarrassment, and yet here you are showing your pretty extensive collection. What has compelled you to build such an extensive collection for this thing?
We should interview you. It's a pity I didn't know before.
The second film, okay. The second is always better, you know that. I have to tell you, first, when you see it first time, you laugh. Because it's funny. Because I born in Bnei Brak. Bnei Brak it's religious city, more religious than Jerusalem, okay? Everything is ultra-Orthodox. And I used to live in community like this. And when I see the stereotype, I mean, the money, okay, with the dollars and the bag with the coins, whatever. Look, they are not rich people. Most of them are very poor, and it's like you have a word in Poland. In Polish, said kombinator or macher. It's very symbolized. When you see that, this is what you think. When I saw this one, I think, Erica, you have it in your collection. I thought to myself, no, this man usually he studied Torah, studied Talmud, not counting money. You know how? Look, this one, okay, from Kazimierz Dolny, and now in the film, I saw the one who's shakel, or spraying.
It's a toy.
It was like in the market. The one was like praying.
Yeah, I'm afraid it's a
in
toy.
the film. It's not a toy. It symbolizes
they buy
something.
it for children, I'm afraid.
Because Michael, you come from America, right?
Canada.
Is it legal? In Canada, okay. So but you know the neighbors. You know their neighbors very well. Is it possible to say nigger in America?
Well, okay. First of all, Mayor, I would prefer that if you use the word, you say the N word. We tried. I feel like we shouldn't. It's not a word that we should be saying out loud. So just out of respect, if I can ask you, if we want to talk about it, use the N word, please. Don't say it out loud, because then we give it strength by saying it. And of course it's possible. Of course it's possible. I mean, we're talking about America. America's a very racist place. There's lots of racism in America. Anything is possible. Is it appropriate? Is it racist? Is it problematic? Yes, but it's possible, of course.
Wait, sorry, Michael, what was the question? What was Mayer's question?
Is it possible to use the N word in America?
Oh, I see. Okay.
Okay. So if it's not in America, it's against the law to say that. So I believe that one day, I mean, my wish of thinking is that. Sorry. Yes.
That's not true. It's not against the law.
Okay, but you might have some problems.
Yeah, somebody might beat you up. Somebody might beat you up if you use it, but it's not against the law.
Okay, look what happened in France, in Paris. Yes, the attack of the journalist offices because of one small caricature about Muhammad. Sorry. So why
Muhammad, you can say Muhammad. Muhammad is not a derogatory.
Yeah, you can say Muhammad, but you cannot make a draw of something funny about Muhammad. And once you do it, once you do it, it's going to be your last day. You know that. So why we can agree with toys like this? This is not a toy, because if a little boy playing with this is what he believed about Jews. The big nose, the big nose, and the money. That's why I spent 200 shekels to make another Jew. Would you believe that this one will be top seller in Poland? Never. Why not to make the Pope? Sorry, the Pope holding money, or maybe a little boy.
Well, I mean, the Pope's not a Jew, Mayor. Let's that's one reason.
No, it is a stereotype. This is a stereotype. The Pope, what's happening in the church behind the wall. If you respect religion, you should respect the Jews also, because we are not only culture. We are not only culture. We are not only people who are wearing black. We have history. We have language. We have mitzvot. We have the Bible. We have many things. Not only this bullshit. And I'm very
Erica, you've been studying these. You've been writing about these. You've been for years and years and years. Maybe you can speak to them a bit more. Speak to their existence and some of your observations.
I mean, my ear just brought up like so many things in what he just said. I mean, we have like the N word with the Prophet Muhammad. We've got the Pope. And then we've got someone who, when he started out talking, said, he laughed at them and he has this big collection, and he still hasn't actually addressed the question of why he has the collection. But on the other hand, by the end of this conversation now, it seems like he's really angry about it or feeling not good about it. And so, I mean, in some ways I was like trying to sort of map out a context for a lot of these conflicted feelings and also some of these comparative issues, both in my exhibition, because I did also then include some, you know, some caricatured, stereotyped kind of figurines and images of other groups. And so I want to do two things. One is I would like to invite my ear to the very last session of this whole 72-hour Lucky Jewathon. The one that I'm hosting, I'm dedicating it actually to these kinds of comparative discussions, and we will have some people who are both experts in, and in some cases representatives of these groups, of Asians, of African Americans, of indigenous people, who can also talk from their perspectives about what with similarities and differences. But I don't know if you're available then. So for the moment, I would just like to go back to the original question that Michael posed, which I think you didn't answer, which is why do you collect these things? Like, what is your relationship with them?
When I saw the first, I think the first one was I don't know where it is. Someone took it maybe. I have maybe hundreds of pieces. Okay. When I saw the first one, I bought it as a souvenir because someone told me that when I go to Poland first time, or Krakow or Warsaw, to find the little Jew. And this is what I was looking for. I didn't know what to see. And this was the first what I saw, and this was the first I bought. And when I start to look around or to choose which one I want to buy, or when I was in the second shop, the first thing was about the stereotype. So I'm sorry, I have to say that. I have a bit I'm obsessive about it because I believe that bridge between people should be without walls. And if someone born and you see in his house, there is something that said that if the Jew is upside down, so the money will drop in the house, something like that. Yeah, okay. So this is something that you build a wall because you already know me. Because when you see me in the street, you know that I'm a Jew. I have the pass, I have the hat, the black hat, and I have the coat. Most of them named penguins, which, it's funny, but it's funny only at the beginning. And it's meant that you already know about me. You have money. Okay. You have the money, you have the treasure of the country. Oh, you manage the world. And I say to myself, okay, first I want to have a collection. One of each, any kind of little Jew. And I start to collect. And sometimes also I come back to Israel with souvenirs to my friends, and I say, take one. But remember, this is not something for funny. This is something to remember how the Poles see us. And I want to say, I made a provocation in the Knesset in Israel. It was a meeting about how we should remember the Holocaust in the future. And one of the ambassadors from many countries was there, and I just put them on the table. And he asked me, what is this? And I said, this is how Poles, when a little boy in Poland, when he start to grow up, this is the Jew that he see every day, maybe every week, it doesn't matter. But he doesn't know nothing about me, and nothing about my education, about my knowledge, about my family, nothing about my life, nothing about my religion. He just know this is a Jew. So,
can I ask a question? Is there anyone in the room who is encountering the objects for the first time? This is their first time. Helen Silverman, I see you. Helen. I see you raising your hand. Do you want to unmute? I'm really curious to hear how you're receiving all of this.
Very strange, interesting. Some of them are anti-Semitic. I think the bigger statue may be like a sort of a naive kind of art that is not necessarily anti-Semitic, but the one where there's money and coin and counting money, it is anti-Semitic to me.
Did you know that that these were being sold and bought in Poland?
Never heard of it. My brother went to Poland many years ago from France, and he never mentioned it. He never talked about it.
Is there anyone else who's kind of encountering this for the very first time?
Hi, Michael.
Yeah.
I'm Christian.
Hi, Christian.
Yeah. And I'm not Jewish. And through the festival, and I saw your YouTube video about the Lucky Jew. So not right now, but recently, I got familiarized with it. And I had some thoughts about the topic. First, I think stereotypes are inevitable, and each nation, each different peoples have something, right? So let's say the Germans lack of humor, French maybe cowards because of something World War II, Romanians thieves, especially in the West, right? So I think we have, let's say, three categories. One, stereotypes could be funny. I consider this, the Lucky Jew, a little bit funny. Some bad, I give you the example, and maybe some good. Germans, that they're very organized, right? So again, I think it's inevitable, and I like your approach, meaning I like that you took the stereotype, and through it, it's a pretext for a conversation, like I'm participating now. If you have called this festival, I don't know, get to know Jewish culture and history, something like that, maybe I wouldn't join, right? But because you have this context, again, and you're using art and culture to address the topic, I think it's a much healthier and maybe more efficient approach. And maybe another secondary, let's say issue that you could approach, and maybe we, in this way, we could address also one of Mair's problems with the stereotype, which I perfectly respect, is that maybe teach people that not all Israelis are Hasidic Jews, right? Or not all Jews are Hasidic. And yeah, that I agree. And again, recently I understood the difference between Orthodox Jews and the other Jews and whatever. And I think if we look at the Jews and the stereotypes that are discussed in the world, I think, yeah, and Mair, you mentioned, I think a bad one and hard to mitigate a little bit is that part of the Kabbalah that runs the world or whatever is Jewish or part Jewish or whatever, right? I think that's the bad one, and that's the difficult one to address. This Lucky Jew, again, from my perspective, it's more funny, and again, I like the way you incorporate it in a cultural project. That's
Can it be funny? Can it be funny? Allow me to say something. There is a restaurant, a food joint in Łódź called Anatevka. I don't know if you know the place, and they make the joke. When you settle the bill, you receive a tiny little Jew. And it may be fun, because when you do it, when Anatevka does it, I can see the sense of humor, but I strongly reject this thing as a funny thing. And allow me to mention my souvenirs provider. When I go to Warsaw, I buy souvenirs in a Sepelia or in a lowbrow thingies, not the art thingies. And I ask my provider, a gentleman I appreciate, why does he sell those Żydek z pieniążkiem, those little Jews with a coin? And he says, because it sells well. And then I try to talk that it is dehumanizing people who are the neighbors, who were 1/3, if not a little bit more, of a Polish population before the Second World War. He doesn't understand. People, I mean, most of people don't understand that representing this stereotype is ugly. And let's go back for a second to the N word. If we have understood that uncles and aunts are a memory of slavery, and we have removed Uncle Ben and Aunt Jemima, there must be a way of removing Żydek with coin. Thank you.
You know, Michael, if I may, I mean, I think, you know, one interesting thing to think about is like, we can't think about these objects in a vacuum, right? I mean, they exist among a whole world of other representations and ideas about Jews and other groups as well, right? And so, I mean, they also exist within a world of active and passive anti-Semitism. So, you know, I think I go around in circles sometimes about whether these things are a problem or whether they're just a symptom, right? And so, I mean, clearly there are problems with anti-Semitism all over the world, and in Poland in its specific flavors, you know, linked to how many Jews people think still there are in Poland, in the world, what kind of power people think that they have, how this relates to, you know, contemporary politics about, for example, post-war property restitution, how it relates to, you know, all these kinds of, you know, ideas about the, you know, like Poland being colonized by the West, which is the same as the EU, which is the same as LGBT, which is the same as Jews and communists and all the bad things. You know, like Kostek Gebert, probably many of you know him, this sort of, you know, Jewish community intellectual, said, you know, like in most places, anti-Semitism works like this. If something is Jewish, then it's bad. But in Poland, it works the opposite, that if something is bad, then it's Jewish, right? It's just like, it just becomes this tool to make everything negative. But I do think it's interesting to actually like think about these things as objects and sort of what do they actually do, actually? Like, because I wonder, do they, and I'm not sure, you know, I don't have the answer, but like, do they reinforce stereotypes? I mean, the ideas of Jews and money are actually still in a contemporary time dangerous stereotypes. So I always bring out the very unfortunate example of in 2006, this young Parisian cell phone salesman, Ilan Halimi, was targeted by, you know, a gang of, you know, kids who were, you know, didn't have money, wanted money, and thought that Jews had money. So they kidnapped this cell phone salesman on the assumption that his family and his community would be rich, and they kept him for a few weeks and they tortured him and they killed him at the end when they found out, well, you know, his mother was poor and nobody was coming forth with all of these bags of gold. So these stereotypes are dangerous. I'm not sure the extent to which, like, you know, what do these objects do in those discourses, and particularly these ideas about magic. And I want to bring us back to magic, because I noticed that we have my fabulous friend and colleague Jeremy Stolo in the room, who thinks a lot about magic. And so I wonder if just, you know, Jeremy might want to say a few words and help us think a little bit about, you know, what it might mean to have an object that there's a whole ritual culture that's grown up around them, that is, it's not only a stereotype, it's a form of what anthropologists often call sympathetic magic, which means this person or this group has, or this, you know, it could be an animal that has some kind of quality. I think that's a positive quality, or I want some of that quality. So if I make an image or an object of that thing and keep it and use it in certain ways, then those qualities will accrue to me. So there is this magic, and that's much longer standing in Polish folk culture. But I don't know, Jeremy, can you talk to us a little bit about magic?
Well, that's a complicated question. Hello there. Thank you. I was going to ask something along these lines, really, of you, Erica, because I think we need to learn more about how, or I would like to know more about how exactly these figurines are put to use. I'm really interested in the fact that they're lucky Jews. So clearly they are meant to impart luck to the owners. And obviously we can discuss these as stereotypes and the harm that they cause in terms of what sort of images they propagate. and how they don't reflect realities of Jewish life in either historically in Poland or elsewhere in the world today. And that's one sort of framework. But it's also really quite interesting that these are objects that get put to use in different ways. People collect them because they're going to produce effects for them. So they're not buying them, if I understand correctly, people are not buying them necessarily because they reflect what they do or do not know about Jews, but because they have a kind of instrumental purpose. Or it's both of these things maybe. And the instrumental purpose is really interesting that, you know, I want, it's I guess it's the name of your title here sort of carries both these things. They're lucky Jews. So they're Jews. We need Jews to carry out this luck, and we need a particular kind of image of Jews to do this work. But somehow the lucky part of it falls out of the story if we're only thinking about the stereotype and the harm that these stereotypes produce. And I'm wondering if you could say a little bit more beyond sort of just, I guess they have a range of functions. Some of them is just sort of curiosities that kind of you collect them and you put them on your mantelpiece or on the wall, and they're meant to be decorative. But they also have a kind of a humorous kind of hopeful, fate-connected way that somehow maybe it's going to do something for me. Could you say a little bit more about that kind of ambiguous way that, in your understanding, that people who purchase these items are navigating that ambiguity?
If I may quickly before Erika, just as a Polish Gentile. So first of all, you know, the movie, it's a very short piece. It's like 20-something minutes, but we did with Erika like a much longer version for the exhibition. So, you know, you could see there more people talking about the reasons for purchasing the figurines, either the figurine with a coin or this beautiful, nice piece of art. So when we made the movie, I was really amazed that the movie was really well received, not only in Poland, but all over the world. It went to many festivals, many universities, you know, wanted to show the movie. It was in Sweden, United States, Israel, in many different places. And actually, what was interesting for me, people were creating around this topic workshops in which they were actually, you know, talking about xenophobia, not only anti-Semitism. So, for instance, Swedish universities were using the movie to talk about xenophobia towards minorities in Sweden, like, you know, Muslim minorities or whatever. So that I found really interesting, that this particular message was able to reach different people as well. Secondly, you know, I was very surprised and lucky that I managed to get the movie to public Polish television, which, as I said at the beginning, the movie is rather controversial. It's not that easy to make such movies, you know, in Poland. So in a way, we took a risk, you know. We didn't get even money for the movie, so it was a risk for us. But what was amazing again for me, it was that many people, after they watched the movie, either in Polish television or around the world, they came to me and they said, you know what, Paulina, it's really like an eye-opener to me. Because you know what, you would be surprised. Like, I'm a Polish Gentile. I graduated from Jewish studies, okay? So many of my friends who are so-called Jewish sympathizers, that's how they call us in Poland, they purchased such figurines. Why? Because that was their very often starting point to get into the Jewish culture. So this is amazing that most of the time, and I would say it's like 90% probably, people buy it not because they are anti-Semite or they feel bad, towards Jewish people. They buy it because either they get interested in Judaism, surprisingly Israel. First they buy a Jewish figurine, then they go to Israel. They fell in love with the Promised Land and Hamas. Now, for example, in Poland we have this new trend. Places with hummus and falafel all over the place, right? Polish Gentiles opened them. Polish Gentiles start them. So, yeah, and then I had another discussion with Israelis mainly, who felt exactly about the thing like a mayor. But then, Mayor mentioned bridges, right? We should build bridges and we should have a dialogue. So I just want to quickly also mention that we had many discussions with Erika and Jewish people and Polish people, like what would be the perfect approach to address the problematic issue. And we came to conclusion that, we could even create maybe not a Jesus with coin, but we could create, I don't know, a Polish man drinking vodka, right? Because that's our stereotype, and we could try to sell it in Israel. Now, is it what we should do? I don't think that is the right way to address it, because at the end of the day, for me, what is important for us is to start conversation without really emotions. Like we all carry some beliefs on both sides. Now here I am Polish, Gentile, and even in the movie, like half of the people we interviewed, they were Jewish, some of them were Polish. So like to me, what is really important about this movie, which was only about asking questions and encourage us to start this conversation, difficult but necessary. So actually, let's just face our beliefs. Let's just start the dialogue and let's talk about it. And yeah, like that's all I wanted to. Sorry, Erika, I took too much of your time, but just
no. It's not my time; it's our time.
I wanted
to. No, I thank you, Paulina. I mean, it's so important to constantly be going sort of, I don't say back and forth, but around the multiple subject positions, the multiple relationships people have with these, because it shows you how incredibly complex it is. But to sort of move back to Jeremy's question about magic, there are a few things that I think I need to say to kind of contextualize this. First of all, the idea of the lucky Jew. These are not called lucky Jews in Poland. We essentially collectively, like Paulina with her film, me with the title of my book, then Festivals with their provocative performance, we have essentially created this name of lucky Jew. And so we have to, own the fact that we are participating in this cultural phenomenon by doing that. The tradition in Poland is to call the figurines the ones with the coins. And again, things are starting to slip over time, but really the ones only with the coins, Żydki. And Żydki is a diminutive form of Jews. And it's a derogatory form of Jews. It's like saying, I don't know, little like kikes or like yids or something like that. So that's really what, if you want like the kind of insider, like as anthropologists say, the emic or the indigenous category, they're called these little, unpleasant little Jews, right? Also, I want to say that the ones with the coins are like, there are many, many different genres of these. So that's why I called my exhibition in 2013, Souvenir, Talisman, Toy. Because those, for me, are like the three main categories. If you look historically, like I personally lumped together an enormous range of sort of folk and now popular representations of Jews under one umbrella, because I think it's useful to think about them in a broader conversation. But they really are quite distinct things. So what we see here is these kind of rocking Jews have a very old, long history, but these are called these Emmaus Jews. They're sold at one church fair once a year for at least, let's say, 150 years, right? And these are actually toys, and they don't only sell Jews, they sell Austrian policemen, birds, rocking, they sell Roma people, or so-called gypsies, like any people who were different.
And I think even a pope, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, a pope, they have different things. Also, they're not only, the ones that rock like this are only the Jews, because it's funny, because it's in the traditional way that Hasidic Jews pray. But, they also have like
the Pope and a Jew on a seesaw or something like that. So they're the funny ones. They're sort of toys, and they're Easter toys. And there's this whole kind of symbolic anthropology kind of understanding of them is like, the energy of spring is coming back, and, it's sort of, but, they're toys for kids. Then there are these ones that got made as part of this post-war secular push by the state to make folk culture and get peasants to create more things that they can sell. And then you had another sort of explosion of a genre of Jews, which I read as essentially memorial objects, because that was the moment where Jews were no longer suddenly gone from Poland. People remembered their neighbors. And so they made figurines of Jews that are kind of more like just folk art.
Wow.
And then more recently, you have these ones suddenly with coins. And what's happening now is like all the different genres. So now the toys also have coins. Now the memorial ones also have coins. So you have this kind of flowing together. So that's one important thing to understand. The other important thing to understand is that, again, in my reading, albeit limited, I mean, there are bigger specialists than I am certainly in Polish folk culture, but in Polish kind of folk cosmology, Jews, among other kind of peripheral figures from the perspective of a Polish peasant, they had a kind of power, they had a kind of magic to them. And for Jews, it was like because they were literate and they had this secret writing. Polish peasants were not literate. It's because they looked different, they prayed in a different way, they had different language. So you can see also, like, from 100 years ago, figural beehives in the shape of a Jew, again, not only, also some other figures, but a Jew, which gives you the sense like the Jew will protect the hive, it will attract more bees, it will create better quality honey because of this connection of Jews with wealth. And it's also the sense of wealth like fertility, because the bees fly in essentially around the crotch area of the Jew. And so, there's a lot of stuff there. So I also want to say that people who, Jeremy, you asked about the ritual aspect of these now. Most people who believe in them don't really collect them. They may have one or two, or you saw the guy in the movie, maybe every year they buy a new one, but they don't collect them as objects because you only need one to make it work. But the thing is, you're not in the ritual, and this ritual has all developed, let's say, in the last 10 or 15 years. The ritual prescribes, as the woman in the film was saying, you can't buy one, you have to be given it as a gift. So first of all, you have to get it as a gift, and then it has these certain behaviors that you do with them. You're supposed to put them, it depends if it's the portrait with the Jew counting money or if it's a figurine, but if it's a portrait, you're supposed to put it near the entrance to your house, which for me, again, shows, both just Jews with money at all, and then also this idea of like putting it close to the doorway of your house. It has this incredible kind of threads of historical memory. So yes, Jews did form the merchant class. And also I'm thinking, wow, this is kind of like a mezuzah. Like Jews have almost, like the missing Jews have become turned into part of what was Jewish culture. Now it's like a Catholic mezuzah. So you have this thing near the entryway to your house, and then and you're supposed to do this on Saturday, lo and behold, historical memory of Shabbat, the Jewish day of rest. You're supposed to turn it upside down so that all the money that the Jew earned during the week then will fall out and will stay in your home, in your Polish Catholic home, right? And also, again, this idea, Jeremy, thank you for pointing out that the negativity we were talking about, but this is actually a positive stereotype, which of course I would argue when times are bad, that stereotype easily flips. But the idea is, this is like Jews are great with money and we want to be great with money. So people who buy these don't buy them because they're anti-Semitic. They buy them because they think that the Jews have some good quality that they want to hook into. And if you go, one of my favorite examples is in Krakow. There's a kantor, which is like a money changer, a guy who sits in the window and changes into all the different currency. And he has a huge portrait of a Jew counting money because that's supposed to show that like this is a good business, just like those Jews who used to exchange money, right? Yeah, and so those are the extra tools I wanted to give you, Jeremy. Like I could tell you more, like, historically, Edita Gavron, another scholar who hopefully will come into this conversation at some point, peasants used to try to connect with Jewish materials in other ways. They would even take bones from Jewish cemeteries and keep them because it was a kind of ritual protection or talisman. So there's magic, going a long way back, and now it's just turned into this strongly capitalist, coin.
I want to answer you something, Erica. When you Google, I just check it now. When you Google Jewish cartoon, do you know what you see?
I'm sorry, who is speaking? I can't.
Mayor. I'm sorry that I took the frame today. When you Google Jewish cartoon, caricatures.
Cartoon.
Oh, okay.
You know what you see the results in Google? I tell you, the Nazis propaganda.
Mm-hmm.
So,
but Mayor, can I ask you, because we're trying to open this other half of the conversation about, of course, we understand the negative stereotype. There's a long visual history since medieval times, at least, of this sort of anti-Semitic, connection with Jews and money. But we're talking with Jeremy about the other things that are also going on.
There is no other thing. There is only one.
That's where you're wrong. That's where you're clearly wrong.
Because the whole point of magic. So we'd like.
All right, hold on. I'm the host of this room. God darn it, Adam, you've been wanting to chime in for
Michael,
a little bit.
Can we hear Jeremy's response?
Yes, we can. He just lowered. Yes, we will hear Jeremy's response. And then we're going to go to Adam, because Adam's been dying to say something, Mayor. Not to cut you off. We know that we're going to hear plenty of you over the next 3 days, but we want to hear from Jeremy, and then we're going to go over to Adam, okay?
Well, there's so many different issues tangled up here, and I don't want to take up too much time, but one thing that occurs to me is that it's really interesting to sort of place this in a context of other kinds of harmful stereotypes that have been kind of reinvented in European cultural contexts as traditional forms of ritual practice. I'm thinking of, like, in Netherlands, there's Black Piet, Zwarte Piet, who clearly has this kind of Orientalist trope, and we know people have done the history of exactly where this very, very painful image comes from, which has been a source of a lot of political protest in Netherlands. But defenders of it will always say this has nothing to do with Black people. This has nothing to do with Orientalism. It's our tradition. And so there's kind of an attempt to sort of detach the image or detach the artifact from the cultural history that it belongs to. It sounds like in Poland it's a very different kind of story, because nobody can sort of present a kind of a counter narrative to say, well, these aren't Jews. This has nothing to do with real Jews in the world. These images kind of somehow they're meant to be anchored in a particular kind of history, a particular ethnic index. Somehow they belong to that reference. Is that correct?
I think it's both.
Paulina, say more.
I think that it can be both, actually. In a way, it's something similar what happened to what happened in Netherlands, but on the other hand, some of them, because not of them, like the majority of them, they don't even look like a human being, Erica showed you some examples. Some of them, they look like, I don't know, what was that, a duck? Some of them, they look like, I don't know, a toy, whatever. So I think it's a mixture of all different kinds of things. One thing for sure, like what I learned during making the project, because again, as I already mentioned, when I started to work on the movie, I felt exactly about that, the way Mayor feels right now. Like I was so angry with that, and I wanted to end it, So that was my mission. But then I realized that it's not really that white and black. It's not that simple, because so many people came to me and they were like, but why you are angry with us, buying this figurine with a coin? Like, we do this because, and of course, for me, it's anti-Semitic, okay? But people don't really understand it. They do. Then, for example, somebody buys the figurine with a coin and gives somebody who is just starting up their business, okay? They do this to help them. And they do this out of admiration, they think, but which is again, according to me, I think is anti-Semitic, but I don't see it this way. They say, okay, so Jewish people, they're lucky with money, so this will bless us, will bring, it's a talisman. So that's one of the things. So I think that it's much more complicated. It has many different layers. Some people buy it out of nostalgia. Now I'm talking about nice figurines, but you would be surprised. You would be surprised how many I've seen Hasidic Jewish people, Orthodox, actually bought the figurine with coin. Like, we don't have this on camera because, the camera is not always with us. Actually, we filmed this movie, I think, within 3 days. So it was kind of fast. But I've seen it. And I was like amazed because for like few years, I was also a tour guide in Krakow. So I was giving tours to Orthodox Jewish people. And I was like, what are you buying, guys? And they said, no, like, why? It's nice, it's funny, it's this. So to me, like, it's very interesting. And I think that, there are no simple answers to it, to this subject. It's like really fascinating. I totally agree with Mayor that, the figurines with coins are just wrong. And I hope that we could remove them from Poland. The good news is that when we filmed this movie, it was 6 years ago. Back then, I saw the figurines everywhere. I went to the bank, there was a figurine. I went to the synagogue, near to the cashier, there was a figurine. I went to the post office, figurine, like people own the figurines to bring luck to their business. Now I don't see them that much, as much as in the past. So I don't know what happened. And also I would like to share like one anecdote. I'm Polish, I'm Christian, and once I was just, I don't know, somewhere at the church, there was a church meeting, and I was really surprised to see this priest who actually addressed the figurines with the coins during the mass. And he said that he is strictly against it, and every Roman Catholic who has one at home should destroy it because it's a sin, it's stereotype. And that Catholics are not supposed to buy such things. So I was like, wow, like there is a hope. I hope there is a hope. So yes, thank you.
One thing to know, not everybody necessarily agrees with you, Paulina. Magda actually just said that she thinks they're getting more popular. We will also just to say later in the Lucky Jewathon, we're going to be visited by the Catholic intelligentsia magazine Contact, and they're going to speak actually about their perspective on the Lucky Jews. Adam Shoren, you've been wanting to talk.
I think there's a lot of interesting stuff here. It's been very exciting to listen to. To respond to the most recent comment, I as far as I know, statistically, they are appearing more, even if you're seeing them less. I know since 2004, at least, they've been steadily increasing, and that the OB stores introduced them, and they were only recently taken away. This idea of the magic quality of them is really striking to me. It's something that when I performed as a Lucky Jew for the first time about over a year and a half ago, I wasn't expecting to like care about that part of it. I was like, okay, it's a good stereotype, it's still a stereotype, etc. I will say what is a quick side note what makes them different from the Holocaust era cartoons that Meir drew our attention to is largely the connotation is not that the Jew here is greedy about his money. The Lucky Jew is not holding on to his money, he's helping you make money. And one of the people that Erica and Paulina interviewed, one of the people who makes them, says, I wish everyone would have this genius. I wish I had this genius for money, right? And it's still obviously a stereotype. It's still obviously wrong. But we can at least acknowledge that in lots of cases it's well-intentioned. But about the details of the magic, I in performing it for the first time started asking people like, what are you going to do with it? Like, where in your house is this going to be? Or how do you know it's lucky? Have you bought them before? Have they brought you luck in the past? Everyone who had bought them before said yes, that they had brought them, that they had been lucky, or that they at least thought they'd been lucky. And there were so many different little, like with any superstition, all these little, like people would argue in front of me, like, you're putting it by the doorway? Are you mad? It can't go by the doorway. It has to go on the left side of your kitchen. Or like, no, as long as it's not facing a window, it's okay. Or, you know, like how often do you turn it upside down? That's ridiculous. Like people had all these little rules about it. And I became very interested in like, what was the mechanism of luck here? Like how is the luck being achieved? There was a group of young people of about maybe 18, 20 years old who were in Krakow for the first time, buying Lucky Jews for the first time. And they bought, we have these massive canvases that we sell, and no one had bought them all day. And then this group of kids like cleaned me out, bought all of them. They're like 75 centimeters long. We can't quite see it, Michael, because of your background. But and I asked them where they were from, and they're from a town 5 minutes away from where my grandmother grew up in Eastern Poland. And they bought 3 for their family members, and the 4th massive one they were going to put in the town hall to bring luck to the town in general. And I was like thrilled by that, right? Because it felt to me like this odd return, like this odd like reverse pilgrimage back to where my grandmother's from.
I just
Michael,
wonder, Adam, is this a time, I don't know that everyone necessarily knows about the Lucky Jew project, which is the project that we do. I know, Judith, you're waiting to talk and we really want to hear from you, but I wonder if we want to just take a few minutes to watch a video about the Lucky Jew project. Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimlet's going to be joining us soon, but I think it might be useful to give some context to this project. Does that make sense?
Yeah, sure.
Okay, so why don't we watch that, Logan? Well, let's spot that video. It's the Lucky Jew video, and it's about 5 minutes. And this is a video that not everyone likes, to be honest. Adam has some issues with it as well.
I have a lot of issues with this video.
Which is great, which is why we do this. So let's watch this video, and then maybe we can then regroup and talk some more.
Hi, I'm Michael Rubenfeld, Canadian actor, living now in beautiful Krakow, Poland. Today's a really special day because today we're going to sell me. Let me back up and explain. When I first came to Poland, I started to see these on people's walls. You can see there's a Jew and another Jew. They're counting their money and they're writing in their book. And I was pretty surprised to see these kinds of images in Poland, especially. People were selling them, people were buying them, they were putting them on their wall. And I started to ask questions and learned that people believe that putting these Jews up on their wall is lucky. It's for luck, primarily economic luck. That was surprising to me, particularly in Poland. Jews have not been very lucky in Poland. During the war, about 3 million of them were killed. And then after, they were still killed in pogroms. In 1968, the Jews were forced to leave Poland. And still, people put these Jews on their wall for luck. And then it hit me. This is pretty lucky for me. I didn't realize that I was lucky. I had no idea, and it took coming here to Poland to learn that. And it occurred to me that this is an opportunity. So I built this. This is my frame. Hello. And on it, I've written the word Lucky Jew, or Żyd na szczęście, which means Jew for luck. I'm going to go out onto the streets of Krakow today on Easter and sell some luck, sell some of me. I've had this made up. This is a picture of me counting my money. Well, actually, contemplating my money in this photo. I'm going to sell this, and people will put this on their wall for luck. This one's pretty cool because while I'm contemplating my money in this one, here I'm admiring my money. I'm just admiring it because my money is admirable. Now, this one's pretty special. This is me just offering you money straight up. The hope is that if people purchase this, the money will just fall into their pockets. Now, this is something that doesn't exist yet in Poland, but it should. This is the Jew with the coin, the lucky Jew coffee mug. You know, usually people just put their Jews on their wall for luck, but with the coffee mug, people can drink their luck every morning. We're gonna go out onto the streets of Krakow and we're gonna try our luck. Na szczęście, na szczęście. Może kupić. Who wants? Autentyczne, na szczęście prawdziwe. Ja jestem Żydów i tu jest na szczęście, Żyd na szczęście, prawdziwe na szczęście. Okay, we made a sale. The cup is gone, only one cup. We're gonna sell out! Jeśli macie obraz mnie, 100% na szczęście. Come with the photo?
All right, let's do the photo, please. Oh, that's great.
I didn't know that people put Jews on their wall. I didn't realize that Jews were lucky in Poland. But I thought, okay, well, this is an opportunity because I didn't realize that I was lucky. It's an opportunity for a business. I see an opportunity for a business, and so I've taken it. If people are profiting off of my luck, then I should profit off of my luck as well.
So you've got Jewish roots.
I'm 100% Jewish. Mam obraz mnie, jestem Żydem, 100% na szczęście. Żyd na szczęście tutaj. Żyd na szczęście tutaj. Prawdziwe na szczęście. Jestem 100% Żydem tutaj. Tam nie są żydowski. Ja jestem Żydem. Tu jest nie Żyd. Ja jestem Żyd. Tutaj. Tylko 50, ale tylko 50. Tu jest 50, tu jest 100. Jestem 100% Żydem. I to jest obraz mnie. $330 zloty, and I'm sold out. Absolutely everything. Amazing. I love Poland.
You too can buy your own Lucky Jew by going to luckyjew.pl.
Thank you. So this is obviously a project we have a lot of fun with. There's a lot of people who have a lot of feelings about this project. Now, one thing to note, I wanted to give you that context. I'm going to have Adam come in as well, because Adam has, we made that video before Adam also began performing as a Lucky Jew. We've also had Jason Francisco perform as a Lucky Jew. Menachem Kaiser has performed. Even Erica Lehrer has performed as a Lucky Jewess, and maybe she'll talk about that a bit as well. Now, the video, of course, is a bit sensational, and we're conscious of that. But it was really interesting when Adam became a co-director of Festival. One of the reasons is because he was really open and challenging this project. Adam, I'd be curious to hear your, why did you challenge the project? And of course, if anyone else would like to come in and talk, you are welcome.
Sure. I had a few issues, or a few questions, I guess, about the project when I was joining, which were, one was if we were, by being Jews who are performing this stereotype, performing this trope, if we were just tacitly or really explicitly giving permission to other people, giving permission to non-Jews to participate in this stereotype, and continue the practice rather than critique it. And two, one thing I was worried about and that I didn't love about the video, I still have questions about the video, is that that Poles are the butt of the joke it seems to me. Sorry, I'm cupping my hand because Thanksgiving celebration is starting here. I'm in the US and trying to wrap up my comments into the mic. And so in the video, for example, I think there's little engagement with the Polish audience beyond sort of the catchphrases. And what I found most interesting in the project or the two things I found most interesting have been the conversations that have happened. Like often the thing I shout in Polish to like people on the street to pull them into the booth is, have you seen a real Jew before? Like, have you encountered a real Jew? And sometimes people have stopped me and said, oh, of course, I grew up, my best friend until 1956 who lived down the street from me in Kazimierz was Jewish. I miss him every day. Like I have a lucky Jew to recall him. And then the other interesting thing is how empowering I've found the performance to be. Like putting on the costume makes it feel, I feel like I'm in this position where I'm dressing up as this, because what to me is most hurtful, going back to what Meir's comment was, is not the negativity of the cartoon. It's just the cartoon. It's just that it's a cartoon. It's a caricature and it's not real, and it makes me feel not real. It makes me. It's sort of the way similar in the United States where we have like summer camps will use Native American names. For different age groups, you have like the Mohawks and the Cherokees and the Chippewa, and the implication of that is that it's fantasy, that it's a group that doesn't exist anymore, so you can say whatever you want. It's a thing of the past. It's kitsch, and that's how I feel looking at the Lucky Jews often. It's not that I'm like, oh, this is telling me that I'm greedy and like, although the one behind you, Michael, looks like he's rubbing his hands together a little, but yeah, that one. I guess he's just holding his money back, but when I see them, it's not so much. I don't feel like, oh, you're telling me I'm a greedy Jew. What I feel is just that you're telling me I don't exist. Is that that's just it's a fantasy, it's a joke, it's a caricature. And what was most exciting for me about performing it was this opportunity to like dress up as this caricature, but be myself and like be present in it and engage with people. And so, when we perform it differently. You, as you said earlier, do this sort of Catskills shtick, and I don't, in part because
Hey, that's
what?
Not entirely what I do.
But those were the words you said earlier. I'm just quoting you, but you're right. And I should say also part of the reason I don't do it is because you coached me not to. You were just like, behave like yourself. Like you gave me an acting lesson. But
I did. You've still got some ways to go, but you're getting there, kid.
So anyway, that's I also wanted to do less of the shtick when I do it. Yeah, but empowering, weirdly, and like taking control of a cartoon in a way that was very exciting for me.
Interestingly to note, some of you might already know this, but this project, what you're a part of now, this Lucky Jewathon, is a result of a project that Adam and I piloted a 6-hour version of the, I guess it wasn't called the Lucky Jewathon at that time, but the Mouse Market, which you saw in my video, you saw of course in Paulina's film, is this place where you do get these Jews, and it's also the place that we premiered our Lucky Jew project. Our thought was people were going to buy their Lucky Jews, and so we thought we could steal some business. I jest, but it really felt like the perfect place to launch and continue to perform this piece. This year, of course, because of COVID, we were unable to go to Emmaus. It was canceled, as is the entire world is canceled this year. And so we did it online on the day we would normally be there for 6 hours. And it was exciting as, if I might, be so bold as to say, this last 2 hours have been. And I imagine the next 70 hours will be. And out of that we had this idea for 72 straight hours of the Lucky Jewathon, which is what we're in right now. I'm going to bring Judith in, because Judith, I know, has had her hand up for a while, and she's wanted to say something, and then we're going to introduce our next guest who is here. Erica, if you're still around, Paulina, don't go away, because I'd like to keep you around in the conversation, because Barbara has joined us, but I want to give Judith some space to speak.
Hi, thank you so much, Michael, and thanks everyone for all this. Hi, Barbara. Hi, Erica. So my perspective is a little bit different. And on the one hand, I'm an ethnomusicologist and a medievalist, and I have a, decades-long academic perspective. But on the other hand, I'm also just a person, and I'm a performer, and I'm an artist. But the other thing is that I have a Sephardic perspective, not because I'm Sephardic, I'm not, I'm Ashkenazi, but I have been working for 40 years, I guess, with Sephardic music. And what I see in Spain and Portugal is not physical, little sculptures or dolls of Jews, but people dressed up and acting as Jews, and specifically as medieval Jews. And so you get this whole kind of, Corey mentioned philo-Semitism before in the chat. So you sort of get this whole kind of pseudo-positive thing, right? Where you have a parade of Jews as part of a festival. And the festivals are called three cultures, not three religions, because religion is like a dirty word somehow. And so they're called festivals of the three cultures, but they're religions. They're Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. And the depictions of the Jews are classic. I mean, they're usually, the girls are beautiful and the guys are gorgeous, but there's also these comic figures who sort of dress up with, pseudo-medieval instruments and robes that look surprisingly like priest robes, and scenes that look a lot like Christmas scenes, sort of, they mix up nativity scenes with what they think of as medieval Jewish weddings, and they take songs like Hava Nagila and say they're authentic 14th century Sephardic songs, and so on. I could go on and on. I've written articles about this. I've done a lot of field work. But if I say anything, then I'm told, oh, no, we're friends of the Jews. We're Spain. We love our Jews. And it feels like even more of an objectification than seeing these little sculptures and statues and dolls of Jews, which I did see a lot of in Krakow 2 years ago, by the way. So I just wanted to bring that up. And also because as an academic, I can look at that from a sort of etic, as Erica was saying, from an etic outside perspective, and I can try and be objective, and I can say, oh, this is so interesting, and analyze it and write articles about it, and I do. But as a person, I'm really insulted. And as I get older, I find it harder and harder, not easier and easier, to separate that academic perspective from the personal one. And then also I get tied up with this Jewish is not synonymous with Ashkenazi Jewish, and I sort of see this happening a lot. So, Ruth Gruber wrote this brilliant book, Virtually Jewish, many years ago already. And I saw many parallels in Spain. And I think we also should open this dialogue further so that all the really, really rich and interesting and important things you, plural, all of you here are coming up with, need to be seen also in the context of Sephardic Jews and Mizrahi Jews and what happens in these different homelands and host cultures that are both real and past and present all at the same time. So I don't know how much sense I'm making, but those are a lot of things I just wanted to toss into the mix. And I'm speaking to you from Canada, by the way. Those who don't know me, I'm speaking to you from Toronto, Canada.
There's another thing, if I can just throw something out in relation to what Judith was saying, I think that relates to this whole domain, which I hope we can talk more about throughout this time, about cultural appropriation. So it's not only about stereotype, but it's about somebody who's kind of an outsider to a group wanting to engage with, use, tap into something about that they think is positive about that group. But, it raises so many questions. All the questions of stereotypes apply, but also the question of, well, who benefits from this? And also, what are your allegiances when that group is not doing so well? Do you also want to identify, partake in, et cetera? Or is it just like a fair weather friend, right? So I think that's a whole other domain that we hopefully can speak about.
Yeah, absolutely.
While I'm cutting my Brussels sprouts.
I agreed. I want to take a moment to welcome one of my favorite people in the world, Barbara Kirschenblatt-Gimlet. Barbara is the Ronald S. Lauder Chief Curator of the Polin Museum of the History of Polish Jews. If you don't know what that is, please Google it. We won't ask Barbara to describe it. It's one of the most important institutions that's opened up in Poland of all time, in my opinion. It's really changed the game for the Jewish narrative here. Barbara, we've been at this for just over 2 hours now. We actually watched Paulina's film earlier that you had a cameo in. And you in the film were talking about your fascination with the Lucky Jew objects. You know, you're really interested in them, and it's great to have you here because I would wonder if you might mind starting by expounding on your fascination.
Well, let's see where to start. I guess, but first, I think, first of all, they're so collectible. So my interest is not in one, but in other words, if one is good, many is better, is my basic philosophy as an inveterate collector of all kinds of things. So, of course, I started by collecting them, and the easiest to collect were, in fact, the paintings, because they're so inexpensive and they come in such an amazing variety. And then, of course, I started to photograph them everywhere I could see them. So I would say, they often say there are more Lucky Jews in Poland than there are other Jews. And I certainly have quite a collection of them at home. I guess they are a very ambivalent object, and I think that's what interests me most about them. They're complicated and they're ambivalent, and I don't know quite, what more to say than that. I mean, Erica has really, really done justice to this topic, but I'm also starting to sort of feel a little bit, particularly with the film that you were just showing, that your intervention, the invention of Festival, it's starting to have the feeling of being aggressive. And I wonder about that. When I experienced Francesco Jason, when I experienced him as the Lucky Jew at the Krakow in the square during the Krakow Festival, there was a certain gentleness about it, in the sense that he was stationary, and then people came by and they were intrigued, and then he engaged them in conversation. But I wonder at a certain point, I mean, I understand the importance of raising awareness of some of the difficulties with this object, and particularly among those for whom it's unproblematic, benign, and should at least, even though their attitudes are positive, and both towards those objects and towards Jews generally, whether they've met them or not met them, although I think that raising awareness is good, I wonder if there's a point where the project moves towards what I would call starts to become aggressive. And so maybe I would leave it there and see how others might like to respond.
Oh, Erica, you're muted. I want to, I mean, I think it's an interesting point. I just wanted to say, I mean, the one thing about the video that we showed, the video is now probably over 3 years old. And one of the things that's problematic about the video is that it's not truly representative of the performance itself. It's almost as if the video is its own object, whereas the performance itself, when we do it, is far less intrusive in public space. I think we blend in more. So I think that your point is well met. I feel that way anyways. And I know that Erica wanted to talk. I did want to ask you, Barbara, before we move on. So earlier on, Meir, who is in the room, showed us his collection. I think he showed us about 10 of his Lucky Jews. And you've now just shared information about your own personal collection. And one of the questions that we were sort of pondering earlier is, why do you have a collection? What is this impulse to actually start collecting them? There's another, Yannick Gebert also has one of the largest collections in the world. He's got probably thousands of them. And there are a number of Jews I'm encountering who are consciously collecting them. I wonder if you could just talk about that impulse.
Well, first of all, I'm a collector. So I collect a lot of things. I collect rubber stamps, cookbooks, nutcrackers, lucky Jews. So I'm just simply an inveterate collector, and there are some things that are incredibly collectible, and this is one of them because these objects are small. They're subject to what feels like infinite variation, particularly over time. They're, except for the beautiful, like I have one on my desk that I love. Here, I'll show it to you just a second. I absolutely love it. And Erica will be able to tell us more about it. But I think that it's, let's see if I can show it to you. I don't know if you're going to be able, just a second. I don't know if you're going to be able to see it. Probably not. It's not really, oh, there he is. It's not showing.
Maybe try putting it just in front of your, maybe if you put it in front of your face. Yeah, there you go.
Yeah. And it's absolutely so moving. I just think it's incredibly beautiful and very, very moving. So I would say that they're very collectible. They, in a way, it's like an invitation, collect me. That's what, to me, when I look at these, what I see is collect me. And, oh, that's very similar.
I think it's the same. It's the same artist. That's why.
It's the same artist. Yeah. Yeah. I have it on my desk, and I just find it so deeply moving. So the first thing is, A, I'm a collector. I collect everything. Number one. B, these are extremely collectible. They're, except for one, like the really wonderful ones like this one, they're really quite inexpensive. They're small, and they lend, and because they are subject to sort of, I would say, so much variation on a theme, then when you collect them, the collection is worth more than the individual object. In other words, if you have an individual object, then either it's a kind of, pardon me, a memento, or it performs as a lucky Jew. But when you collect them, you then have all the variations and permutations, and the collection as a whole has much greater value than a single, any one single object in the collection. I guess there, and also I think I am attracted to their ambivalence, and also because they're so interesting to think about. They're, especially the paintings, not so much the carved figures, but the paintings are amazing. Drawing from, I mean, going to the history of art, 17th, 18th, 19th century, and then almost like photoshopping in these lucky Jews. In other words, looking for paintings where you have somebody, anybody, counting money or doing something that might be appropriate, and then adapting it. And so there's a kind of, increasing sophistication. That wasn't the case, say, 30 years ago. You wouldn't have seen it, but increasing sophistication, and also the way they sit within a series of other types, like the gluttonous monk, or I'm intrigued in shops where I see them together with figures of Christ, angels. So they exist in a whole sort of range of contexts of other figures that are caricatures, you might say, or even affectionate portraits, so to speak, of other types. So they're not really, alone in that regard. So they are the gift that keeps on giving. And my only regret, I do have one regret, and because I have also duplicates. I always have duplicates because I'm always looking to be sure I have something, stashed away that I can give as gifts. I can't give them away. That's one thing I cannot do. I have duplicates. I am dying to give them away as gifts. I can't. Who am I going to give one to? What are they going to think? Are they going to hide it, throw it in the garbage, throw it back at me? That is my one regret. I can't give them away.
Well, I can tell you, I would happily accept one from you if you wanted to ever gift me with a lucky Jew.
You already got it.
I
already have.
I love that one of your reasons for one of your arguments for purchasing them is that they're inexpensive. I just love that so much that you said that. I also just love I just love the way that you specifically talk about them with such kind of love, and like a real anthropologist. And it's interesting because one of the reasons I really wanted to invite you in, Barbara, is because there are so many people who have such strong feelings about them. Jews in particular, have a lot of very strong negative feelings. We have been advertising, albeit with the acknowledgement that the advertisement is provocative, and we have just received so much vitriol, not necessarily about the project, but the imagery, what the things themselves represent. At one point, I had said that I would like to see them gone entirely, and you were really against that idea. And it is great to hear you kind of speak about them now with this kind of love. I'm just curious, is there, what about what they, what they're kind of representing, what they're projecting for Jewish people?
Okay, I mean, listen, Michael, we know, Jews and money, anti-Semitic stereotypes, religious, we know there's no mystery here. We know, and we know that such images are offensive and that they're identified with anti-Semitic imagery that's actually used in terrible ways. In other words, let me put it this way: these objects, when I encounter them, I think when we encounter them on tourist stalls and in shops and whatnot, they're not aggressive. They're if you have it on the same shelf as Christ and the greedy monk and some other characters, they're not aggressive. What I would say is that there is, if you will, a kind of a range of reactions to them that reflect where consumers or boycotters are in relation to those images. But those images are not part of an anti-Semitic campaign. They're not a part of a series of posters that say Haus Jude, that are showing Jews and lice, or they're not part of. That is to say, they don't sit within what you would call an anti-Semitic campaign, and in relation to other, like obviously, clearly anti-Semitic iconography, images, messages. That's what's so interesting about them. That I would say that I have to guess. I mean, Erica is the best one, but my intuition tells me that the people who sell them are people of goodwill. The people who make them are people of goodwill. The people who buy them are people of goodwill, and that probably none of them would think of themselves or understand themselves to be, quote, anti-Semitic, and who don't see the images as negative. So then what does that puts them in a very special category, and that is, and which is actually a very dangerous category. And the dangerous category is the category of images and statements that are unwittingly anti-Semitic. That is, that are or can be understood or received, experienced as anti-Semitic without the maker, the consumer, the seller, the buyer, in any way being aware of it. And it's that is probably the most that's probably the most dangerous category. That is, if something's overtly intentionally anti-Semitic, it's out there, the person saying it, doing it, accepting it, they all know what it is. But this is of a completely different character. So in that way, it's not that I love showing stereotypical Jews with coins and money and identifying Jews, Hasidism, or whatever it's supposed to represent, and money as somehow rather, great. Not at all. Not at all. And, but as I guess I come to it as an ethnographer, as a folklorist, as an anthropologist, and what that means is that my first instinct is to be non-judgmental. And that is to come to it in a way that's non-judgmental. Here's a bottom line, and that is when I come, there are two things. One, anything I find disturbing is worth studying. That's my first my first rule, that if I find it disturbing, uncomfortable, difficult, even repulsive, then I know there's something going on there, and I want to try to understand it. So that's like, for me, that's a starting point, and these objects, in that regard, are a starting point. But the second thing is that in order for that starting point to be productive, I cannot be judgmental, because the moment I'm judgmental, I stop thinking. The moment I say, "Oh, it's bad, it's terrible," what else is there to say? It's the end of the story. So to be judgmental, which is completely antithetical to an ethnographic approach, but to be judgmental is to stop thinking. It's to close off thinking. And so the challenge for this kind of material, and maybe even one of the reasons why I collect it, is to keep this disturbing phenomenon open to think about it. That's so it's not that I love them, I hate them, I want them to stay, I want them to disappear. No, none of that. None of that is relevant. None of it is relevant. What's relevant is that they're out there, they are difficult, they take many forms, they have many meanings, they have many lives, and actually, we cannot get to the bottom of them. There is no bottom. So
can I respond, Barbara, to a couple things you said that are so fabulous? So I had, Barbara touched on like 3 areas that I think are really important. One is, how they're not overtly anti-Semitic, right? Like they're obviously not Nazi propaganda, like that kind of thing. And I think, we've just, it's so wonderful. Actually, one of the, we've just entered into a conversation with the city of Krakow about this problem. So there's now some interest in, like, on an official level, recognizing that this is a problem. What kind of problem is it? And what kinds of tools might there be to deal with the problem? But I think in those conversations, what's been so interesting to me is the really limited way that many very well-educated Polish people understand anti-Semitism. And the problem is, I think that they understand it only in those very overt ways, right? Like if you're not burning down the house of a Jew, or, putting some, like making anti-Jewish laws or something, then it's not anti-Semitism. And I think that this whole domain, Barbara, that you're pointing to, of like the way that visual culture creates a world of signifiers within which we understand and relate to ourselves and people different to us, and the way, if you just look at the images of African Americans that were afoot during the Jim Crow era, it's very obvious then, what they were helping to do, right? And so I think that one thing of like, what is, how does anti-Semitism work, and what, kind of maybe along a spectrum, that's one. The other, the question about why does one collect? I think that's it actually links into the other issue I wanted to talk about how do we teach people about this, because the idea of collections point to the idea of museums, right? And so I think sometimes people collect because collection is a form of control as well, right? Like by collecting something, you can regain a kind of dominance. And if I've been hearing Jewish people here, and I've felt it myself, feeling somehow belittled or erased by these objects where, it's like, well, I'm not that. First of all of the objects are Jews. Are men, sorry, they're all men. I'm also Jewish, but I'm not a man. So I don't exist in the whole world of the figurines, right? And so by collecting, collection is a way of controlling and giving meaning. So if someone makes a collection, all of a sudden they give it the meaning, right? So like, taxonomies are always a taxonomy of what? And so like I could hear, for example, in my ear talking, it sounds like he's collecting because he wants to make a taxonomy of Polish anti-Semitism, right? So that's a way of now he's giving the meaning. He's taking something that may have other meanings to other people, and he's saying, I know what this means, and I can show you with my 700 figurines. And then the third thing, Barbara, that you pointed out, which I think is so important and really touches on, what I've been struggling to do in different ways over the years and continue to, is how do you use these objects for good, for dialogue, for consciousness raising, for education, and without shaming or with shaming, I don't know. And this gets into a very, I think, provocative, very contemporary question about, you know, what some people, I don't love the term, but what some people call like cancel culture or, you know, calling out or that kind of thing. So, you know, I tried very hard in my exhibition, again, just as Barbara described, in this very kind of ethnographic, anthropological way of sort of opening something up, showing multiplicity, not judging, not, you know, kind of determining or categorizing, but opening questions and asking people to think about them. But, you know, I work and I curate in this domain of, you know, what's sometimes called difficult knowledge, right? Or difficult heritage. And I also, you know, I've kind of come to understand, and there's some wonderful kind of educational theory on this subject that, you know, we always say, well, we don't want to re-traumatize people. We don't want to, you know, force, you know, negative history in people's faces because it will be hurtful, especially people who maybe have already been hurt. But I feel like, unless there's just unless there's some discomfort, unless there's a small amount of pain, that people don't learn. Like you only change your mind when someone's kind of poked you out of, you know, it kind of makes you wake up in a way. And so I think it's something I'd love to hear discussed more among, you know, all of the different guests about whether, you know, what's the line between opening up something for discussion in a way where you don't shame people, where you call them in rather than calling them out. But, you know, at a certain point, like earlier on, you know, Michael, someone was using the N word and, you know, had to say, hey, like, we don't want to do that because actually just the word hurts. So there is a moment at which, you know, you may have to, I don't know, well, that wasn't a really calling out, but I wonder if anybody wants to reflect on that about, like, is shame or kind of provocation or I don't know, or finger pointing or whatever is sometimes useful, just as much as trying to not shame people. You know, how does pedagogy work best?
That's a really good point. I want to bring it. So yeah, Adam and Jeremy, maybe yeah, you've both been wanting to talk. Adam, I think Jeremy's been waiting just a touch longer, so I'm going to give it to Jeremy. I do want to say, just before you speak, Jeremy, one of the things that's been really interesting is that while we've had a lot of Jewish people take issue with the Lucky Jewathon or the imagery, we've also had a lot of Polish people angry, telling us that what we're doing is lying, that these objects don't exist, and they seem to also strike a real aggression, you know, with some Polish people as well. And so I think that also sort of touches on this question of when people feel like they're being called out or when people feel like they're shamed and the kinds of responses you get and whether that is or is not useful and when. Jeremy.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, so many different tangents here. I just wanted to throw in one minor footnote that might be helpful to also think about it, and it's to try to read some of these struggles around the ambivalence of this kind of an object through histories of idolatry and iconoclasm. And there's this kind of constant tension around whether things are too powerful or not powerful enough. And this kind of, we always have this kind of Janus-based critique. On the one hand, these kinds of objects are supposedly dangerous because they produce all of these dangerous effects, and they're poisonous, and therefore they must be destroyed or they must be dealt with in some way, removed from the public face because of their power to affect. But at the same time, they're supposedly too weak. They're never supposed to, they're never adequate to represent what they're supposed to stand for. They're just statues, they're just images, they're just caricatures. And so somehow this kind of ambivalence, which I think we can see a long history in this, all kinds of places. Certainly Jews themselves have participated in this discourse for many centuries ourselves, around ambivalence, around figural image production, around the kind of questions of whether images are too dangerous or too innocent. It seems to me that we're kind of caught in part of what you're describing, Barbara, I think, about this kind of ambivalence with them. It's not only about whether they're difficult objects for the point of view of the individual consumer, the individual user, but I think the critic also is faced with this constant struggle about whether to attribute too much power to them or not enough. That's
Adam.
all. This was a kind of an observation about the discussion that occurred to me.
No, wonderful
I just
observation.
should tell you, Jeremy, that as you were talking, Magda, Michael, and I all wrote to each other, "This is fascinating. Like, this is so interesting." This is because this is a direction in the conversation. You know, some of what we've said so far today about Lucky Jews, about these objects, about the performance, are conversations we've had a version of many, many, many times. But thinking about them in terms of idolatry or iconoclasm is something that has not come up for us. And so this is a very interesting direction in which to take it. I'm going to backpedal a little to what Barbara was saying. You know, I find myself maybe not agreeing with you entirely, but aligning with you a lot. One of the other arguments that Michael and I have in performing this piece is that Michael talks about it as a form of activism, right? Where the end goal is to get rid of the Lucky Jews so that they're not an object that exists anymore. And I always like cringe at that, even though I'm not like pro anti-Semitic imagery. You know, I can't bring myself to be like, I think the end goal of this art piece is to get rid of them. And because I agree with you, I think they're interesting. I think they're worth talking about. I think they share a lot about, I think they're a very good starting point. And I, to respond to Erica, I don't think you can learn from a place of shame. I don't think you can change your behavior from a place of shame. I found that one of the most exciting things about these conversations is that the humor of it, or the bizarreness of it, right? That when we do it on the street, it's an interaction no one's had before. We haven't had it with a particular person. The person having it has not had it, has not spoken to a live Lucky Jew. It's such a weird place that it feels like that. I try very, very hard in these conversations to, even if my opinion might be that what the other person is saying is wrong or is upsetting, I try to be very gentle in how I talk about it and I err on the side of humor and sort of like weirdness or silliness rather than calling out. And, you know, like the other college campus term around cancel culture, calling out, et cetera, is calling in, right? Where you bring someone in and make them feel good about what they're saying. And there's the last thing I would love for you to respond. The last thing that Barbara said about everyone having positive intentions. One of my favorite interviews in the exhibit you did, and well, we haven't even talked about your other folk art of the Holocaust exhibit, which could be a whole other 72-hour-a-thon, is someone says, right, that like the person making them does them with a lot of love. The person buying them does it with a lot of love, etc. And generally people are positively intentioned, and I agree with that. One time did someone try to buy one from me and seemed to think because I was a Jew, like part of the interaction would be haggling. And they were like, they like lowballed me by like, you know, they offered like a third of the price. And I was like, no, like we have prices that we're selling them for. And they were like, but you're Jewish, like you're supposed to argue. And she got very mad very quickly that I wouldn't do this with her. And then I was like, well, I'm not going to do it now. And so I'm not even going to offer the possibility of it. And that to me was the one thing that felt not positively intentioned. That to me felt a little wrong. And also people taking photo. Sorry, Michael, you're raising your hand. I
just want to, well, there's a couple of things. Carolyn, you've been here. We've not heard from you. Welcome. Before we go, I do want to, there was a comment on Facebook by Josh Dolgan, so-called, who is up next. It was for Barbara, or for the room. Josh said that he's a collector too. He would never buy one. He thinks they're gross. He asks, would you collect little cotton picking figurines if you were African American? I don't think there's anyone who's African American here. These are just questions. And he also asks, Barbara, what would your father have thought of these figurines in your opinion?
It's a good question. Josh, what are we going to do? Okay, so the first thing is regarding cotton picking little girls, whatever. Yes, the answer is yes. In other words, there are collectors of anti-Semitica, Jewish collectors of anti-Semitica, and African-American collectors of racist imagery. And there's even a museum, something called the Jim Crow Museum, which is a museum of precisely this material. And it goes, I think, to what Erica was saying earlier, which is that you can talk about shame, or you can talk about something which is actually extremely important in Holocaust memory in Germany, for example, and that is, I would call it self-indictment. And that is when you take ownership of whatever history it might be, and where rather than take the position of being indicting, which is what Jewish Holocaust museums do, than taking the position of being self-indicting, which is what the German ones do. So I think that the issue, so that's a separate issue, but the answer is yes. If I were African American and I were concerned with these issues, absolutely, I would collect the material. But I think it's interesting lately, and most recently, with the Black Lives Matter, that the brands are changing. Aunt Jemima, Uncle Ben, they've changed those. They're changing those icons. So, but I had some other thoughts that were. What would my father think? I don't think he'd be offended because he was so irreverent himself, honestly, that he probably, it would be an interesting conversation, but I don't think he'd be horrified, shocked, and say, "Oh, this is trafe, this is toxic, this is, don't collect it." I don't think so. But I wondered if there might be some other kinds of interventions. So, for example, what would happen if one were to collect these figures and without damaging them, remove the coin? And actually even to do it as a stealth. You know how there are these sort of stealth actions in supermarkets where there's something there and it gets replaced with something else? It would be an incredible stealth action, maybe even secretly in collaboration with the store owner, to replace all the ones with a coin with ones without a coin, for example. Exactly the same one, whether the coin is removed or it's before the coin is applied. That would be fascinating. But the second, which I think is the most interesting of all, and that would be, and to plant these in amongst the ones with a coin, and those would be figurines of Jews that look like us now, with a coin. Because one of the interesting, in other words, to actually intervene in the medium itself, to intervene in those images, to intervene in those objects, and in contexts where you don't expect it, and where the sheer act puts all the ones with a coin or the money bag or whatever into some kind of a weird context. So if you were to have, and maybe even a recognizable figure, people who don't, quote, look Jewish, but who, quote, are Jewish, present in this genre of figurines, paintings, whatever, with a bag of money, with a coin, etc. I mean, just to somehow or other mix it up, and in a way to startle, within the medium itself, which I think would be very interesting. So the third thing I would say is, David Engel has for decades argued against using the word anti-Semitic. And so I think to myself, what would happen if we removed the word anti-Semitic from the conversation and had to find some other ways? And they can be the same messages. I mean, the same, and we can proceed with the intention to address the same issues, but we didn't use the word, quote, anti-Semitic. We didn't use that word. And then the question becomes, then how would you and how would we talk about these objects? Because it's too easy. The label is too easy. It explains too much and not enough. And so it would be as an exercise. In other words, this would be kind of like an exercise as a way of, because otherwise we just go around in a circle. Are they anti-Semitic? Aren't they anti-Semitic? Do you love them? Do you hate them? I mean, there's like, what else is there to say?
That's really interesting. I wanted to just say,
Mayor,
you, Oh yeah, Mayor did have his hand up. We're going to go to Carolyn before Mayor. There is a museum, the Jim Crow Museum, which is dedicated entirely to objects, racist, seemingly racist objects, black objects. And I just tried to fact check this, but I've heard from a couple of people that Spike Lee, in fact, is a major collector of lawn jockeys.
Michael, if I may, we have somebody from the Jim Crow Museum coming on Sunday at the end.
Oh, amazing. I tried to get Spike to join us, but he was busy, sadly. Carolyn, before we go back to Mayor, Carolyn, you've been waiting for a while. I'd love to hear from you.
Hi. Yeah, hi there. I'm Canadian living in Berlin for the last 30 years, and I'm just fascinated by everything I've heard tonight, and just thought I'd throw in my 2 cents. Maybe a bit from my perspective. I'm married to an Afro-German woman who's been the leader of the Afro-German movement for the last 40 years, and my son is Afro-German, and so, I always like to say where your Betroffenheit, where your part, where you touch into these things, and I definitely, our family is, very aware of certain isms because of this particular thing, and so I keep making the comparison to Germany and to, what has happened since I've been here in the last 30 years, which I would say, has gone from having these candies called the N-Kiss through to they're not called that anymore. And it was very hard for people to, and there was like a 10 or 15 year period where some stores still called them the N-Kiss. And I'll never, just one little anecdote, I couldn't speak German, and I go into this Turkish bakery and they have an N-Kiss on sale, and I'm trying to say to them, don't call them N-Kisses. And they're saying, like, you want to buy one? How many? I mean, in German stores, you got to get in and out. There was no customer service queen type of thing. But just to say, I feel personally it's been a huge bonus not to have to face those things every day, and they still exist. And when people serve them to our family, we've even had people serve them according to color to our family. We've had times when we take those boxes full of edible food. I mean, they're marshmallow covered with chocolate, and we throw them in the garbage in front of the person who's brought them to us. So we've had all sorts of interactions, which maybe could be akin to what is happening there. I've also had I'm not going to talk about that tonight, but I've had quite a relationship to the so-called Lucky Jew. But we've discussed quite a few of those things tonight, the Black Pete in Holland, the so-called cigar store Indian that the lawn jockeys, which still exist on Canadian lawns today, far and wide from wherever any Black people have ever been. And I personally feel, as being a lesbian, for instance, that I am happy that I can get married now. It's brought a certain respect that before the law that we could get married did not exist. I'm personally happy that people feel that they can't bring out really blatant stereotypes without insulting me. And I think that leadership from above does help. I think discussion is good at the grassroots level, but I don't think it's enough just having a fat belly friar next to the Lucky Jew, because there is no equivalent stereotype really against Christians. And when I heard this conference was coming up, I racked my brain for one entire long COVID walk, what would be the equivalent Christian stereotype of these figurines? And the only thing I could come up with, to be perfectly honest, that would hurt that much would be sexual abuse within the Catholic system, okay? So that you'd have little figurines of a priest with, say, a little boy sort of, kind of cuddling into his robes, or another one patting him on the head. It's not a priest with money. It's not. That doesn't hurt. Like a sexually abusive Catholic priest. And you have hundreds and hundreds of these in different little, and of course it's only men, right? Because priests are only men, so there's no women again. I mean, I'd love to hear your experience of trying to be the lucky Jew there, Erica. And would that hurt? You know, would that be as offensive, and that you can go? And I want to just say, I have no comments against Meyer or Barbara for collecting these things. You know, I think if there were hundreds of exceedingly hairy butch dykes out there for sale, I'd probably start collecting them too. This I really do understand. So I don't think it's, but you have to imagine the Jim Crow Museum is a museum. You know, they have mostly been taken off the market. And the last thing I want to say is that I believe it is philo-Semitism, and I believe philo-Semitism is the flip side of anti-Semitism. And I think, you know, I think the people buying them with all the good intentions, they are anti-Semitic. And I just would like to say that in this round. I think, you know, most people are anti-Semitic. Most people are racist, and not in hit you over the head with a bat type thing. I mean, here in Germany, I have given for 20 years anti-racism workshops, 20 years with my partner, Catalina Oguntoya. And you can't believe, these are really it's only good intentioned racists who come to our workshops, only. You know, they're all really nice people who would probably buy a lucky Jew. And so, you know, I think we, you know, that's great. I'm very happy that it's all done with well intentions, but it doesn't take away the sting.
Michael, is it okay if can I respond again, or am I taking up too much space here?
Please, yeah, no, please do. I just wanted to make sure everyone who wanted to talk with their hand raised could have some space to talk, please.
Yeah, I mean, you know, everybody brings such important points, and it shows. I mean, this is just so incredibly complicated. I'm kind of like yes to just about everything that Carolyn said, and I think that's why I hope, Carolyn, maybe you'll come back on Sunday from in North American Eastern time from 10 to 2. We're going to have the whole 4 hours is going to be, I have guests, we're talking about comparative stereotypes, African American, Asian, Indigenous, et cetera, to try to broaden this conversation and see what we can learn from thinking across cases. Yeah, I mean, I don't think that, I think that it's a slight overreach to say that philo-Semitism is just there's a lot of the discussion about philo-Semitism has just, in fact, yes, explained it as anti-Semitism by another name or anti-Semitism in disguise. And I don't think it's that. And I think that we do have, and I think we don't fully understand the phenomenon if we just erase it, because as Barbara said, there's like, well, or at least we need to make more gradations because there's blatant anti-Semitism. There are people who hate Jews. And in fact, even with these figurines, I have had a few experiences where people have clearly been looking at them in a negative light. So there was one when we were doing some filming and going through the Sukianitsa and talking at the different market stalls. There was one seller actually told us that a buyer had come to her, asked her to put some figurines in a bag and write on the bag, Dogazu, like to the gas, meaning, you know, Jews to the gas, right? So there was this kind of, and in the film, as you can see, even when it's unintentional, the first people who go to the Emmaus market, they say, every year we come here and we hunt for a Jew. And I don't think that that's, you know, obviously they meant they look really hard for one and find the best one, but especially after Jan Grabowski's work about, you know, the ways that people really did hunt for Jews, you know, when the ghettos were being closed and you know, during the war when people were hiding all over the place, and Polish neighbors did hunt at times for their Jewish neighbors to extort, you know, money from or get, you know, yeah, and killed them at times. I think that violence is there. But I do think that as Paulina was saying, because when people think that they're doing something good or think that they're hooking into something positive, and also because of the blurrings between Jewish figurines with coins and without coins, and the ways that there's clear both nostalgia and also, especially for people who, you know, are either like grew up during the communist period or still hooked into that culture, like a way that this is including Jews in whatever form is seen as a plus. It's seen as a resistance against their erasure, which is another problem in the way Polish history is told. So I just want to complicate
I think there is something more complex to be said about philo-Semitism, and not just to collapse it into plain old, single flavor anti-Semitism. And I just, on the other hand, I did want to say that the distinction you made with the Jim Crow Museum, I think it's important to note that they haven't like collected them all and now are using them for educational purposes, so it's somehow more okay. I mean, they're doing wonderful work, and it is mostly for educational purposes. I mean, it's entirely for educational purposes. But David Pilgrim, the founding director of the museum, and it's on his collection that the whole museum is based, he said, the problem is that if this whole museum burned down, I could replace the thousands and thousands of objects I have within 1 month or less on eBay, or going to these sales and fairs. So this stuff is alive and well, and there's no way, I mean, that's the ambivalence also for collectors, is like people who collect, they are contributing to the market. They're not removing things from the market, they're just creating more demand. So we have to understand that too. Thanks.
Should I?
Sorry, I just wanted to, I wish you had a mic to drop there, Erica.
I think
Meir.
I'm clicking my
Meir.
to drop.
Meir.
Yes. Okay.
Meir, yes.
Yeah.
Join us again, Meir.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you. First, I'm curious what Erica she is cooking there.
Today, it's American Thanksgiving today, so I'm supposed to actually be Zooming with my family and eating some traditional foods together with them shortly.
So next time you need to cook chulent. This is the eve of Shabbat,
I'm not Jewish enough.
It's not a problem. I'm afraid that the discussion is a bit problematic because it's trying to give some approval, some kosher certificate for something wrong. Because I understand, but I'm very practical, okay? I'm not from the academy, and I think when we discuss, we're trying to see how it can be exist, and I'm sorry, it cannot. On April last year, I exposed something to the world in Pruchnik, 250 kilometers from Krakow. The Poles hang up Judah Iscariot, Judah Ish Krayot. The man, we know the story. But if you Google it, and you will see the dress was very close to the lucky Jew, but without the coin. So those kids was trying to hit.
Meir, I think that some people might not really understand the reference point. I think it's a good thing. I just wonder if you could explain what you're talking about a bit more for people who might not know.
There is a yearly annual event. I think it's the eve of Easter, if I remember, which making a new annual court to Yudash. Oh, that's right. What's Erica? What you see from Erica's screen now, and this is a local ceremony, and I think every few years it show up again. Why this Yudash? Why he looks like a Jew, like a Hasid? And I have to remind everyone that the Hasidim, the dress and the hat and all the equipments around, first, this is a Polish clothes. Second, the Hasidim exist only about 200, 250 years. So I believe if we can trying to imagine how Yudash was looking, he maybe wear something like Jesus, with the white dress and maybe long hair, I don't know. So the kids who's holding the stick and trying to hit Yudash, they hit the same figure like the Jew with the zloty, okay? So I think they might be very confused to hit him, but he's for lucky. Why? I'm sorry. It's a big problem, and nobody can say that this is not anti-Semitism act. I think nobody can say, "Oh, we are sorry. This is traditional." There is no tradition to hang up a Jew. Yes, Erica, please.
Mayor, I have to say, so thank you for bringing that up. And I can give you another example that I think is even more useful, more equally useful and contemporary. In 2017, I think, at an anti-immigrant rally in Wrocław, there were, Polish nationalists, kind of skinhead type of people who, and this was an anti-Muslim, anti-Syrian immigrants. So this is the refugee problem at the moment. And the kind of the cathartic, the kind of, the high point of this rally was burning one of these straw Judash type figurines, right? And so, of course, if you know more about history of anti-Semitism, it's like, it makes sense because, people think so poorly about the Syrian, Muslims that, of course, the world Jewish conspiracy must be the ones who are trying to impose the downfall of Christianity by bringing these Muslim hordes here, or some logic like that. So, but what I want to say is, just because these stereotypes are dangerous and have this anti-Semitic potential, it doesn't mean that they can't be other things as well. And so if we look back at the African-American experience, someone who has this Aunt Jemima or Uncle Ben's rice, right? Surely you can't, I don't in any way want to say that these are not stereotypical and belittling and racist, but you also, I just want to make space for the fact that the people who buy them, they don't, it's not like a kind of hatred of Black people. It's a belittling of Black people. It's a diminishing of them. It's making them childlike and things like that. But it's people do this because they have fond memories of their African-American nanny who brought them up when they were a child. And I think it's important, maybe not politically, but analytically, I think it's important to make these distinctions so that we kind of understand a range of human behavior so that we can develop tools to address it better, right? So I think that it's all I think that we want to say is it's complicated. We don't want to take away anti-Semitism, but we don't want to just reduce it to a really narrow understanding of
Erica, it's not so complicated, because if one day those lucky Jew will stop, okay, the next generation, I live in Israel. We said all the time, we have a very big issue with the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. But we said all the time, stop about educate to hate Jews, to hate the Israelis. And why? I believe this is not about soldiers. We're not talking about fighting on the streets. I believe that if one day you stop something to show to the youngest generation, the future will be more clean. The future will be more easy to explain why we wear black coat, why we have the pass. Okay, and this is all about. It should be stopped immediately. And this is not to try to explain why it is in the shop, because it's bestseller in Poland, because it's good for the economy of Poland, because I don't know, because people like it. I don't care. I don't care. This is stereotype. This is not only stereotype at the moment in the street. This is education against stereotypes. And when someone see, if a little child in Poland wake up in the morning and see a Jew, a lucky Jew in the house, and one day later see a film, and one day later the father call him to go to the ceremony to hit a Judash, and he see the same figure, it will never stop. Okay, this is all about. And I want to say something. I have more collections. I don't collect only lucky Jews, and we collect Hamsa. I believe you know what is it, Hamsa. This is, I think, every house in Israel you can see Hamsa. Okay, I just went to the kitchen to take off from the wall. I have maybe 200 pieces of this, and another one, okay, Hamsa, and no, I believe there is no one who's was offended if I collect it. It's also bring good luck, and it's also good for the one who sell it. So it's good for him money. So I believe if they, you know what, if it's for luck, maybe the figure should be a Bible. Maybe the figure should be matzah. I don't know. Why to put stereotypes? And while you stop it, it will stop. And someone, I'm looking.
I just want to say, I don't want you to think I'm not like pro Jewish figurines. Like I'm not trying to think they're great and we should sell them.
No.
But listen, I think it's a legitimate question to ask whether they're a symptom or whether they're a problem or whether they're a little bit of both. Because I think personally, like when we spoke with the city, there were propositions that they should just ban the sale of Lucky Jews. I'm not sure that would help actually, and it might actually do something worse because the anti-Semitism in Poland and in the world is it's not inside these figurines. They're in a complex relationship with something broader. So, but also this is my Americanness. We say, well, generally free speech should be met with more speech, and I'm interested, in kind of education. But I do think, to agree with you, there's a difference between my political stance and my emotional stance, and then my analytical stance as a scholar, trying to understand something. When I understand it, I want to understand every nuance. What do people feel? Why do they feel that way? What does this image relate to other images from before? I mean, so many other questions. That's not to say that I think that these are a good thing, but so I just want to be clear about that, right? I'm also just not sure that, Germany takes the stance of banning, because of their particular history, banning certain expressions of anti-Semitism, like, and then, but I don't know. I mean, if in the United States, we're having this long, painful dialogue about getting rid of these racist stereotypes of African-Americans and indigenous people that are like sports mascots for sports teams, right? I don't know. I mean, honestly, I'm not the person to say because I'm not a member of one of those groups, but I think the dialogue.
One
Sorry,
second, Michael.
I just want to say this is a great. This is actually a really great point because I'm actually going to take a moment now. We're going to transition. My time, we've only got 55 minutes left of me, and so I want to take advantage of it as much as possible. We're going to actually transition. I have invited a colleague who can speak to indigenous imagery and its use. And we're going to move there in a second. I think we're going to actually have another colleague who's been watching on Facebook, Monique Mojica, who's been arguing you, Barbara, in fact, and your commentary on the Lucky Jew project. She doesn't think it's too aggressive at all. Maybe she'll come in and she'll talk to you about it in person. Monique is an incredible matriarch of the Canadian theater. And Herbie Barnes is going to join us in a second. Before that, we're going to take a moment to focus on one of our partners. Speaking of Americans and American Thanksgiving, Meir, Erica, Barbara, I'm going to invite Paul in. I just want to thank you all. This has been far beyond anything I could have hoped for. I love this conversation. I love that there's disagreement and argument. It's so essential, I think, to what this is. And it's important that we don't all agree so that we can continue to go deeper into this. And I hope that we continue to do that over the next 72 hours. I'm going to say thank you and not ask you to leave, but I'm going to invite Paul Bargetto, who is also an American living in Poland, one of our partners. Thanks, Barbara. Barbara is leaving. Thank you so much. Paul Bargetto is the artistic director of El Dorado Theater. Why don't we start actually, Paul, by showing the video, the trailer of El Dorado Theater, and then we're going to come back and you can tell us a bit about El Dorado Theater. We have, in fact, 8 or 9 different partners who are helping us stream across the world right now, and one of them is Paul. So Logan, if you can play that trailer for El Dorado. Okay, let's get back into this spotlight. Spotlight Paul, spotlight me. Paul, hi. Welcome,
Hi.
Paul. Happy
Thank you.
Thanksgiving.
Thank you.
Oh, you're in Warsaw right now, yes?
Yes, yes.
And maybe you can take a couple of minutes to tell us about El Dorado Theater.
Sure. So I've been working as a theater artist in Warsaw for almost 10 years now, and I wanted to open my own theater as a dream I've had for a long time. And so when I started to get serious about it and we started going around talking to various political leaders to talk about, will you give us a building in Wola? Would you give us a building here? Would you give us a building there? I decided that I really needed to come up with a name for it. And I just happened to be doing some research, and I was quite surprised to discover that there had been, at one time in Warsaw, a theater called El Dorado. And I think the thing I was most excited about was the fact that there was a theater called El Dorado. I thought that was really intriguing name to find in Poland. And then I did my research, and it turns out that this was a very intriguing Jewish theater, which has had a very long history in Warsaw, going back quite deep into the 19th century. And it occupied a very interesting place in the theater landscape in Warsaw, because it was outside the traditional Jewish neighborhood of Warsaw, but it was actually in the old town, but close to Wola and Mironów. And it gained a reputation over time as a place where Polish audiences would sometimes come see work there. Particularly when it got to be about turn of the century, there were actually very famous Jewish plays which had been translated into Polish and were performed by Polish actors. And this became very interesting to me as a kind of concept. And then later, of course, El Dorado became a very famous historical theater, in that it was the first theater which opened in the ghetto. They were forced out of their old place, and they were all the artists and actors who were part of El Dorado were forced into the ghetto, and they reopened there as the first Jewish theater operating in the Warsaw Ghetto. And they performed incredible nonstop repertoire, pretty much until the bitter end. So of course, it's a heavy duty history. And there's a lot of threads in that, which I find very fascinating. But I thought that I'd like to bring that name back to the fabric of the theater life of Warsaw.
And Paul, I think you're doing I think the work that you're doing is amazing. We have big plans, I know, with Festival to continue to partner with Paul and El Dorado. We're happy that this is one of our first partnerships, and we're looking forward to continuing. And also, when we can gather again, all of the things that we can do. Paul and I connected quite quickly because we're both, former North Americans now living in Poland, who also happen to work in the theater, which if you think about how that works, it's not so easy. And Paul has been one of my inspirations in how he's been able to make it work. Paul, thank you so much for your partnership. I'm going to transition now into the next segment, and I'm going to invite two friends of mine, who I've been talking to about joining, and that's Herbie Barnes, and one who has a really interesting history, and is, these are two of my favorite people. This is Monique Mojica. Monique was on the Facebook chat, and she was being very vocal And she was arguing with Barbara, who's now left, Monique, sadly, but I let her know that you disagreed, that you had my back about the Lucky Jew project. We've spent the last 3 hours. It's been an incredible conversation talking about these Lucky Jew objects. I know you guys haven't been with us for the entire period. I'm assuming you've got some sort of basic knowledge about the objects. And, we've really kind of kept this conversation in this world of in this kind of world, this Jewish world. And actually what was really great is that Erica Lair, helped us sort of transition into the conversation that I'm hoping that we might have a little bit about how we find the use of imagery of the the indigenous imagery, or the quote unquote the Indian. Now the reason I've been thinking about this for years, actually, since starting this Lucky Jew project, because as soon as I started to see these images of Jews, these caricatures of Jews, the first thing I thought as a Canadian was about how often I see indigenous imagery being used, being caricatured. And in Poland, I've been shocked constantly. It's even worse in Poland. Of course, it's terrible in Germany as well. Monique, you have a really interesting history with Poland, with your Jewish side, but I think I'd love to touch on that in a second, but I wonder if we could just sort of jump into this kind of conversation. And let's just imagine the people in this room have no idea what I'm talking about at all. Maybe one of you would be happy to even just provide a bit of context, if that's a fair thing to ask.
Noedi, Noigambi, Anuga Olona Dili, Oloedi Dili, Gano Sokta. Well, I am Monique Mojica. Those are my names in Dulegaya and in Cayuga, in which I was adopted from Six Nations. I have, in addition to Kuna and Rappahannock, that I was born, the nations I was born into and then adopted into the Cayuga Bear clan, my father's side is Ashkenazi. My grandfather specifically, that family is from Łódź by way of Warsaw. And I've had the very strong privilege to have been a visitor in Poland twice. Last time I saw Michael in Katowice, and it's been really, really strong. It was as strong as somebody with mixed ancestry, but not mixed identity, to be someplace where my European ancestors came from. And I was actually able to touch the house that my great-grandfather lived in Łódź. I didn't know anything about Lucky Jews. And I just want to say to you, Michael, I so enjoyed the video. As a political embodied performer, what I need to say to you is that the risk and the valor, the actual personal courage that it takes to put your body, your Jewish body, with all the history and all the memory and the DNA and the bones and the tissues and gristle in that position. There's no way that I can see that as an act of aggression, but as an act of bravery. And I wanted to ask you to talk a little bit more about the body in performance. Is when I perform, and I've done a lot of street theater, guerrilla theater, though not so much so often. The kinds of performances where we stormed the Mexican embassy during the height of the Zapatista uprising, and fell down dead in their offices and lay there until they called security. Or we did it in Eaton Center, and we did it at Mexican Independence Day. But what it takes to put your body
your actual flesh body in those positions is really, I thought it kind of got lost in this conversation as a theater practitioner. As an Indigenous person, I have to say that we are bombarded by this imagery every single day. And I think it was Carolyn or somebody, no, it was Barbara, who was talking about the way in which anti-Jewish bigotry is seen only as the most extreme. If you're not shoving people into the ovens, then you're not an anti-Jewish bigot. But that the subtle ways and the accepted and invisible ways in which these images are used to, in the case of Canada and the US, to build an entire identity. And I do have to correct you, Michael. You called me Canadian. I am neither Canadian nor American nor Panamanian, and they all claim me. I am Indigenous. I am Kuna and Rappahannock, adopted into the Cayuga Bear Clan. And that's very important for me to present that in that way. I collect little kissing Indians, they were called. They're salt and pepper shakers of kissing Indians. And I started collecting those because there were always a lot of them in my grandparents' china cabinet. And then in, I guess, the 90s and early 2000s, my father, which is my Ashkenaz side, started buying them for me because he was just sort of like, get them off the market, right? And I have an entire collection of these tacky, from the 30s, 40s, and 50s, Indian ephemera. I know other African Canadian, African American artists who also collect ephemera. Janet Sears wrote a play about it called The Adventures of a Black Girl in Search of God, in which part of the main plot was that these older people, these seniors, these elders in Negro Creek area north of Toronto, went about stealing lawn jockeys and other ephemera from white lawns. So I think it's really, really interesting that such a thing exists actively in the present modern society of Poland, that these figurines exist. I didn't see them, but I also wasn't looking for them. I was looking for other things. So, Herbie, help.
Yeah, Herbie, why don't you?
I was letting you go. You're brilliant as usual, Monique. So I was like, I learned so much from you. So I'm taking it all in. I too. I mean, you were talking about the sports teams, and you know, early on, when you're young and you're silly, you kind of associate with that, and you know, we take that on. We were wearing, because it was cool, because it identified us when we were wearing the Chicago Blackhawks or the Cleveland Indian hat, or we thought it was kind of, hey, that's neat because that's who I am. And then we realized that it's a dehumanizing factor. What happens is that it's not about, it becomes a symbol. We become a cartoon. And if we see ourselves as cartoons, then we can easily drop an anvil on our head, and it becomes, they're secondary. It's what the priests and the churches did to us. They dehumanized us by giving us numbers, in the same way that it happened with the Jews, and that made it easier to abuse, to kill us off. You know, you had more of a chance to this is a fact that I've researched. You had more of a chance to come home from World War I than you did coming back from residential school. So that's, to me, that blows my mind, to send your children away, and that was an interesting fact. So the name changes that are happening are a good thing. And the part of the thing was that I keep getting, I'm sure Monique, you get this all the time as well. What's the big deal? It's just a name. It's tradition. We're honoring those people. it's interesting. Do you know why the Cleveland Indians are called the Cleveland Indians, Michael? Or why the Chicago Blackhawks?
I have no idea.
So it can't be an honoring thing if you don't know the history of it, right? If it's not passed on down through that. Monique, do you know the history? You know the history of the names, do you?
Wasn't it the it was either Penobscot or Passamaquoddy baseball player that they took a picture of him and made a caricature of it for the Cleveland Indians? That Chief Wahoo was actually, what was his name? Sakama?
Yes, Sakama. That's exactly
Sakama.
it. His name was Louis Sakamas, and he played for the Cleveland Indians for a couple of years before he. But what happened was they were called the Cleveland Spiders. And then what was happening is this guy was such an unbelievable baseball player that the people were saying, let's go down and watch this Cleveland Indian play baseball, right? This Cleveland Indian guy is really good. So they became known as the Cleveland Indians, even though they were called the Spiders. And then they changed their names to the Naps, I think, because of another baseball player. And then when they wanted to rename it after he left the team, they said, you know, well, we're used to being called the Cleveland Indians. So that's something that, if that's not part of your history, you don't know that it's honoring that baseball player as such a great baseball player. The Chicago Blackhawks were named after a World War I fighting squadron. The guy who owned the Chicago Blackhawks wanted to honor that squadron by naming the hockey team after this squadron, who in turn honored Chief Blackhawk, who fought in the War of 1812. Right? So, but you don't get to hear that side of it. Instead, you get these, you know, the Cleveland Indians did the tomahawk chop. You get, you know, the Redskins period is just an awful name. The Redskins was the pelts that used to, if you took a scalp from a red skin from a native man, you could, it was $10 per male, $5 per woman and child, and those were what the Redskins were. So imagine calling your football team after that. So
hey Herbie, do you have some headphones? Do you have some headphones, by the way?
Am I echoing?
Hey, you're just a bit fuzzy. Your sound is fuzzy.
How about now? Am I better now? Is it better now? All right.
Yes, you are. Great.
I have a special non-fuzzing button. So it's just knowing the facts and doing that, but it's also the dehumanizing. Even after you know those facts, if it becomes an honoring thing, then you can't do something like Chief Wahoo, which is a cartoon. You can't do, you know, you have to honor those people and keep them human. I think that's the main thing that I'm fighting for. And fighting for the humanization and the characterization of the movies too. I've always looked for that, where it's not just the Unga Bunga Indian, which is, you know, important.
Yeah, that's a really interesting statement that you just said, that you're fighting for. I mean, one of the conversations that we've been having and will continue to have is what to do, how to negotiate these objects. And you just said you're fighting for something. What does that mean, that you're fighting for? What does that even look like?
Well, I think I'll tell you, like, there's a number of ways that we fight, and Monique, you fight in you fight in a different way than I do. I use humor. I sort of use satire to do that. I kind of try and get on the inside. I'm also one who wants to be in all of the meetings that where the conversations happen, and I educate. I go into the schools. It's amazing. I work with a private school right now where I go in and I talk to 10-year-old girls at this private school, and all I do for one day, I go in and I just go, you can ask me any question you want about First Nations people. All right? And I want you to know that there is no dumb question. So I want you just to ask, and I will try and give you as much information as I carry. And if I don't have the information, I promise you that I'll go and research it. So the first year I got there, it was, do your people live in tents? Do you still, are there still, where are native people? I said, and they're all gone, they're all dead. And so they don't, where are the native people? And so I started off with that before they knew I was, they knew I was First Nations. And then what happened was I went, where are all the native people? And they went, they're all dead, or they're way up north. Right, that was the two answers that I got, and I go, what if I told you one was here in your school right now? Okay. So these 10-year-old girls. Now what's happening is we're getting, so now the teachers hear that. So then I come back the second year, and then it was, well, why did they send people off to residential school? The third year I come back, they went, the British government was in charge at that time. Why don't they apologize for what they did? And it's like me, I'm going, whoa. So that's the generation that's going to make major changes. That's the people who, I'm at the tail end of it. I'm going to get the tail of this where this unbelievable change is happening. But the young people of today are not allowing it to just be passed by. Monique, do you agree? I'm passing it to you now.
I do fight in a different way than you have. I don't happen to have the kind of faith that being inside the power structure allows you to change anything. It's been more my experience that folks get absorbed and co-opted by the institution, by the power structure, and completely undermined by it. My platform has always been the stage, and more recently, what I write about doing that work. And going back to exploding stereotypes, I think that my tool has been my body, which is why I was referring that back to Michael. How do you use your body, you're actually who you are, and everything and everyone who courses through you, to explode and throw up those stereotypes by revealing, in a way that theater can, that performance as intervention can, reveal what it feels like on the inside. I think you can see up here, there's part of a set, this oval piece that came from a performance called The Scrubbing Project that I did with Janny Lauzon and Michelle St. John in a company we had called Turtle Gals. And Michelle, I think, is somewhere out there. Michelle and I, what we shared on the stage during that show, and examining the investigation of what did it mean to carry two peoples who have undergone genocide. And the name, The Scrubbing Project, came from having discovered early on when we met that we each knew someone or who ourselves had tried to scrub off our color.
Yeah, the bleaching.
And Michelle and I looked at the stereotypes and expectations and misinterpretations from both sides. In my case, I only had my dad because the rest of his family went to the camps, right? But what does it mean to carry both? And what does it mean to get inside? And we were really irreverent, and deliberately so. We were deliberately irreverent. People came at us. People were upset. People could not hear. A lot of Jews couldn't hear that these two brown women actually had a Jewish parent each. So they came at us for telling story that we had no right to tell. They came at us for being irreverent. I mean, one of the tropes that we got inside were, because there were three of us, is the Marx Brothers, which is really full of Yiddishisms and that kind of a lot of the Jewishness that went into vaudeville and then went into Hollywood, and so we looked at that a lot. So we were questioned a great deal. around ownership. Not so much on the Native side, because a lot of Native folks understand the place that we were coming from. But it was weird to a lot of people. And people have said to my face, "You have a Jewish father? Well, how did that happen?" And my father, in his later years, I remember him at a dinner table when someone asked me that, and he turned and looked in his dry way and said, "In the usual way."
Right, of course, yeah. It's interesting because we're dealing with, see, there's the other side of it too, that that I'm still struggling with right now is I love my culture. I was raised on it. My mother was a fighter in the 60s here in Toronto, and she lost her status when she married my father 6 months after I was born. So I kept my status. I've always been a full status Native person. But my younger sister, who's 11 months younger than I am, is half the Indian that I am, even though we have the same parents, right? So it's really interesting where I'm going, yeah, I really want to share this culture. I think it's unbelievable, and it's beyond that. I want people to know their traditions. I want to share those traditions. I want to share the stories. And if they want to write about it, I want them to do the research on it. And I want to make sure they get all the information. And so many people, because we do have that fear of sharing any of our culture without it being stolen from us. And so I'm struggling with that side of it right now as well.
I have a question for you both. I mean, one of the things that has been really interesting for me living in Poland now, but coming from Canada, or identifying as a Canadian living in Poland, is that, I feel at least when I was in Canada, there's a conversation. Even here, I'm still really engaged in the conversation, in the conversation in Canada. The government is very, intensely engaged, whether you like how they are or not. There's a lot of energy on what the government's calling truth and reconciliation. There's a lot of, certainly within the arts world, there's a lot of funding going towards Indigenous projects, all things that I think are really, from the outside, really, are important. And I know you have probably a million opinions about how things are going. What's interesting that what I've seen in Canada is, in Poland, in and around this sort of like Jewish conversation, is that it's actually, while the kind of global Jewish conversation, I feel has become much more, the Jews got a country, after their genocide, and there's, and we could say a lot about that. Meir is gone, and so we won't get into an argument about Israel right now. But in Poland specifically, the conversation's really, in my opinion, around kind of Jewishness, or the representation of Jewish culture, how Jewish culture sort of intersects with contemporary Poland, is really flat, really like, I actually feel like it's miles behind where the conversation is in Canada in relationship to its colonial genocidal history. It's a huge mind fuck for me. But I'm really curious to hear you guys talk about, how you have seen things progress, why you have seen things progress. Have you seen things progress? And some of, what are some of the tools? Because one of the things that we're trying to talk about is like how to progress. So I'd be curious to hear you talk more about that.
What you said about the conversation not happening, in such a present way in Poland. I think that speaks to all the more reason why your theatrical interventions cannot be gentle. They must not be gentle. They need not be gentle unless you find a moment where you have to be. I really can't speak about reconciliation. What I hear and see most in my circles is that reconciliation is dead. I don't know if it ever was alive. I don't see how you can have reconciliation without conciliation. And I think that we've seen a number of funded, highly publicized, and all their photo ops at, now I just lost a word. Investigations, and there's another I word, senior moment, that have been shelved. You know, you've got those whole 96 calls to action. Well, the whole thing's been shelved. And in other well-known truth and reconciliation inquiries, that's the word I was looking for, inquiry, in other famous truth and reconciliation projects, whether you're talking about Chile, whether you're talking about South Africa, whether you're talking about Guatemala, what happened in those times was also a regime change. They would change their constitution, or, you know, now it's just happening in Chile, but Canada has no intention of changing anything in the constitution. You know, it's still, the majority of Canadians have this image of themselves, although somewhere back there with Pierre Trudeau in his fringe jacket and the birch bark canoe, which is in the Ottawa airport. And that image, which is an appropriated image, is part of how Canadians define themselves as who they are, of the land. And the image, the appropriated image with which they give themselves the right to the land and its resources. And resources and resource extraction is directly related to why we have over 4,000 missing and murdered Indigenous women within the geopolitical borders of Canada today at this moment, and probably more. Those are the reported cases. So
highest reported cases of suicide, all of that. We know by the pipeline that went through. When the First Nations disagreed with it, they went around the backs and they you know, they paid off certain other people to say let the pipeline go through. When the inherited leaders said it's not good for our land, we don't want it, and that's part of our right to say that, they went around their backs and went through with the pipeline anyways until all the protests went down. So if you're talking about that, we need to have a dialogue and not just sort of we're sorry. And I think Monique's right. I think the whole thing is there's a lot of show that goes on. They throw a little bit of money in the direction, and you know, at the Olympics they hand out the carved pieces, the Inuit pieces that go, here you go, now this is part of Canada, but it's but we're not receiving that. I think something like 89% of our reserves have non-drinking water. You know, areas like Shoal Lake, the Shoal Lake Reserve that provides the water for all of Winnipeg, can't drink the water because there's no treatment plant there. So they have to boil their water. Six Nations has to boil their water. So that's where it comes in. That's where lives are important. Can you imagine if a city like Toronto had to boil their water, how quickly the water treatment would be taken care of? So it's those kind of things that we're aware of. Absolutely. We've scared Monique off, by the way. We chased her out of the room. I never thought that was possible. Yeah, I think it's, but I think there's fighters out there. You know, there's still protests going on in Six Nations about the land, the land that's there. Oka was another protests for land that they knew was property of the Mohawks. So it's hard to take all that.
Susan WR just said, fantastic discussion. In the USA, Native Americans don't even get a look in, and Flint needs to boil their water. I'm so glad they have a platform at least. Yeah, this is
about the American, the Canadian difference goes back to the War of 1812. I mean, part of the unbelievable thing that happened was in the War of 1812, the Americans came in and they went, "We want your land," and there was wars. There was Indian wars. Those happened, but what happened in Canada was that we made agreements. This is all those treaty rights that we talk about. You know, all that stuff that we talk about was because in the War of 1812, the Americans said we can come up and invade. They have no army there. The British people were over in France, in Britain, fighting Napoleon. So there was very few soldiers here. And they came to the First Nations people and they said, look, if you defend our border, what we'll do is we'll give you native lands. We'll give you Wisconsin, we'll give you Upper New York, we'll give you Indiana, we'll give you all of that territory so that you can build your world there and we won't invade. And what they were doing was putting a buffer zone between, so you're talking about Flint, Michigan, all of Michigan, that type of thing. All of that area was going to be native territory so that if the Americans ever invaded again, they'd have to go through this rough area of native population before they got to Canada.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Sorry, I grew up in Iroquois territory in upstate New York. Sorry, I'm a Jewish history scholar, but this gets right to my very bones as someone from America. And it's appalling the way that the Iroquois nations, especially to me, are treated in America. I love seeing the two of you guys on here talking about the way it is in Canada. But for me to go to Canada, when I go to Vancouver, when I see the fantastic museums and such, I just can't believe that that's even an option. But America's obviously terrifying right now.
Well, we have those agreements, right? Like we signed those treaties that were laws for forever, and you can't break those laws unless both sides agree to change them. And
in America, we just don't care. We'll just break the laws.
Right.
But they're broken. They're broken.
They're broken, but that's what we're still fighting is those contracts that we know, that everybody knows we're legally binding, and that we're sitting on, that we're going. So all of that territory was all of those rights, the education rights, the health taken care of, was all because we defended that border from the attacks. Mm-hmm. We had an understanding, and we believe that. It's one of the interesting things that I really want to figure out where that tipping point was for us, and I'm really interested in. We have such a culture that is the First Nations culture is very inclusive. We've always been inclusive. When people landed here, we didn't chase them out. We went, how can we care for you? Let's show you how to live here. And we let that continue to creep on until it got too far. We got sick from the diseases, and we still kind of went, we should push back. And how welcoming are we in those communities where we go, where we let that go, where we kind of fought for that and had that association.
Bringing back to the conversation around stereotypes and tropes, it's not lost on me that today is Thanksgiving in the U.S. And there are all kinds of tropes and narratives that are still really alive and active in the U.S. on this day.
I was going to bring that up because the belief is that it was what was the nation that had Thanksgiving with the Pilgrims and that
Wampanoag.
Yeah, that's the story. But I've also heard that it was not. It was a celebration of them wiping out a village, right? So it was the settlers came in. They went into this village and killed the women, children, and men. And then they had, let's have a big celebration, and that was the first Thanksgiving. So it wasn't even this coming together as much as it was. And then they built this. Then they built that dream of it, right? Same with Columbus, where we go, oh, Columbus discovered America. Never set foot in North America. Never was in North America. And so when those statues came down, it was like, you can't do this. This is America's history. No, it's South America. He went to South America, and he was horrible. He was. He would. There's stories of him where he cut off hands if you didn't bring him enough gold. He would just a real struggle to. How do you?
I believe that football on Thanksgiving is somehow reflective of the decapitated heads that were kicked around in the streets during that time of the Pequot Wars and the killing of I forgot his real King Philip. Oh, St. John, I'm going to forget his name. King Philip Wars.
If I may add one very, very small positive note, I'm absolutely loving all the memes that I'm seeing going around the internet talking about how this is just like the first Thanksgiving. Or if you go to visit people, you're bringing them death and destruction and vitriol. And I know that that's made a lot of people that I know go and say, wait, what? Wait, how is that like the first Thanksgiving? So
right.
Maybe we've got a very, very small positive in the education sense here.
I'll give you that. And that's good. That's a good. I haven't heard that, but that's a very good one.
Let's go and infect other people. Yay, just like the first Thanksgiving.
Yeah.
Hey, is there anybody else? We've got about 10 minutes, give or take, before I'm done, and So-Called is going to come on and play some music. I don't know about you all, but I'm ready for a bit of music. This has been an amazing 4 hours. I just love that the two of you are here also now talking about this. I think it's so important because, it's like we get into a Jewish bubble quite a lot, because that's, what that's why we're here. And I love that we're taking it out. This is going to, we're going to be taking it out often. Carolyn, who has my favorite quote of the night, because you're here, I wrote it down, Carolyn. Carolyn earlier said, if there were hundreds of Harry Butch Dyke objects out there, I'd probably start buying them too. One of my favorite quotes of all time that I had to write it down. Carolyn, over to you.
Well, I am from unceded Mi'kmaq territory. That's not how I introduced myself in the beginning. I just said I was a Canadian, but I will say that now. And I often wondered, if I returned to unceded Mi'kmaq territory, what would I do as an activist? I've been 30 years in Germany. I left, which is maybe the best thing I could do. But here in Germany, this is a country that has tried to face its crimes against humanity, for better or for worse, in many, many ways. And as Erica Lehrer discussed earlier, there are things that are actually banned. You cannot actually be a Nazi legally, for instance, in Germany, and so on. But I've been involved with something that Atalia, who's one of the hosts here, has been involved in, which is there is a child of Albert Speer, who was Hitler's architect, who, when she realized she was inheriting Nazi wealth, she was going to not accept her inheritance, but friends convinced her to do something. So she set up a foundation called Giving Back. And I just thought, what if, settler Canadians, settler, colonists, did something like this? And I thought, well, you can't call it giving back because it never belonged to settler and colonial Canadians, right? It never has. You know, where I come from, which is East Coast New Brunswick, you know, it's unceded. So you can't give back what was never yours. But what would that look like? I'm trying to bring it back to the lucky Jews in Poland. You know, what would it look like if a country really took the bull by the horns and did something? What?
Land back.
Yeah.
Land.
You know, land back, exactly. What if every person living on unceded territory, when they die, they can put it in their will, you know? Land back.
Do they have to die beforehand?
I don't think you'll be able to move them to do it otherwise. You know,
I left. I got out of there. All right, it's not my land. Go ahead. I'm out of here. I'm going to Poland.
Did you leave us some land? Michael, did you leave us some land that we don't know about?
I could only afford to buy land in Poland. Toronto's way too expensive.
Can I tell you a story, Carolyn? Last year I directed a show called Inheritance in Vancouver. And it was about that issue. A woman whose father had been living on this big chunk of land, who owned this big chunk of land, who got it from, you know, generation after generation. So it's third generation. But he found out that his grandparents stole it off of the native people in BC. And so it was a pick your path adventure. So the audience got to vote where the cast went. And we did this show, and we had a woman who was in the audience who did that. She said, she wrote to the producers and said, this show really moved me. It has affected me in a big way, and I realized that I am on unceded territory and that I have been lucky enough to live on this. So she changed her will. When she passes, that land is going back to the First Nations. It's hard because, listen, I understand as a human being, I struggle with, I have to eat tomorrow. So it's not as simple as being able to give back in that way. I'm lucky enough to own my house, and it's just definitely not through me, but through my wife and being able to afford it a little bit. But I fear my tomorrow's dinner. I'm not rich, but I have a little bit of comfort now, a little tiny bit. But I remember a few short years ago living from hand to mouth, trying to make sure that I'm eating. And I think we live in a world right now where and I've said this before, is that we don't think of the seventh generation like First Nations people did 7 generations down the line. What am I doing now that's going to affect my great grandchildren? Instead, I'm thinking of the 7th decade, which is, how am I going to exist when I'm 70 years old and nobody's taking care of me? And if we stopped and we thought of ourselves as you know, and this pandemic has been a great sort of eye opener where, you know, in Canada we have we've been lucky enough that the government has gone, we're going to subsidize, we're going to, you know, hasn't been great. There's mistakes made, but we haven't felt the starvation that's happened, the fear of starvation that's happened in the USA, where everybody is just staying out and working, and so it's been a little easing, except for the barbecue place that stayed open here in Toronto. Have you heard about this?
I heard about it. Yeah.
Yeah. So it's just like you know, what we need to do is survive as a community again, to be taking care of each other, to live in that way that we live in such a way that we're not afraid of being alone, where we're not afraid of being taken care of, and being aware of each other, finding neighbors again, being human again, community, if that makes any sense.
Of course. Friends. Yes, Monique, I was just going to, good call. So Monique is going to be part. Herbie, you don't know this, but actually on December 19th and the 20th, we're doing a project that Monique is a part of, and she's asked me to plug it, and I'm happy to plug it. Tamara Podemsky and I are co-producing what we're calling Post-Memory of Genocide, Land, Inheritance, and Artistic Response. It's a 2-day gathering between Indigenous artists and Polish Jewish artists, where we're looking at the intersections of the two cultures, this post-genocidal space, and how artists are responding. Festival will be advertising more about this. Monique, as well as Tamara and 3 other wonderful artists and 5 other wonderful Polish Jewish artists. We're going to be spending 2 days together with the public, who are going to be invited to participate like this, and we're hoping in a couple of years we might even make some art if we're lucky. So there's more of that to come. Herbie and Monique, you're both amazing. Thank you so much for coming. We have to move on because in 1 minute I'm done. I've been here for 4 hours. It's 12 o'clock. I'm getting ready to go. You guys are incredible. And you know who else is incredible? Our next guest, Josh Dolgan. Josh, you're gonna have to turn your camera on because I'm about to introduce you. Woo! How do I?
Hey,
Josh, how are you?
Excellent. How are you? Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Perfect.
I'm amazing. I've had an amazing last 4 hours. If you've not seen all 4 hours, it'll be recorded and put online.
Okay. I saw lots of it. It was awesome. And it's very interesting people that I'd love to meet and hang out with and make cool stuff with someday.
Well, let's make that happen. I mean, Josh, I think this is hopefully the beginning of a longer relationship between us, between Festivalt and you.
Oh. Lucky Jew.
Yeah. Josh Dolgan, you're named Josh Dolgan. Do you want that name, or do you want so-called? I say Josh Dolgan and people are like, huh? And then I say so-called and everyone goes, oh, right, that guy rocks. There you go. That's great.
Thanks.
So you have a lot of fans. You're probably the most famous Jew we've got, believe it or not. We're really honored.
What a claim to fame. Okay, I'm honored to be the most famous Jew at the Lucky Jewathon.
Well, you're the most famous dude, because most of us are Jews here. So you're the most famous person.
Wow, I don't feel famous.
Yeah,
hanging
no one
out
does.
in my parents' house in Chelsea, Quebec.
None of us feel famous. Okay, I'm gonna end this. I'm gonna hand this over to you. Okay. I'm gonna disappear.